Tears streaked their faces, but Zeke couldn't see any visible wounds on them. He lunged up as far as his restraints would allow. Renewed anger, hot and sharp, flooded through his body. "I'm gonna kill every single fucking one of you," he grated at Darius. "You mark my words. You messed with the wrong guy." Darius clapped his hands and smiled. "Oh, anger, I like that. Just try to make sure you put all that anger and passion into your job, okay?" He walked over to Amelie and reached out for her. She saw his hand and jerked away. But Darius leaned in and caressed the side of her neck and her cheek with his fingertips. "So pretty," he said, and the words felt filthy, like they came from a sewer instead of a mouth. "Don't you fucking touch her!" Zeke shouted. Darius pulled a knife and held it near Amelie's face, still with that insufferable smile on his face. "Just make sure you do your job and everything will be fine, Zeke. Do that and you'll get your girls back. If you deviate, though, you'll still get them back, but they'll be in pieces." He leaned closer to Amelie and she tried to pull away from him. "You have such a beautiful face, man. I'd hate to have to cut it off because your boyfriend didn't follow instructions. Don't you want him to follow instructions?" Amelie looked at Zeke, then at Darius and nodded. Her eyes were wide open with fear, and tears still leaked onto her cheeks. But a fire of pure rage burned within that glare of hers. "Don't worry, love. Zeke's a smart guy. He's gonna do everything he's told, and then we'll all throw a party together. Sound good?" Darius patted her on the cheek, then straightened and turned back to Zeke. On advice from Amelie, Zeke had buried his burning desire for revenge. He had focused on just moving on with his life. Now it all came back with reinforcements. No one could touch Amelie and Delilah and get away with it. No one. After this, he vowed to tear every single one of them apart. Darius stepped up to the table and pulled something out of his pocket. "All right, Zeke, it's almost time for us to get started, which means it's time for you to take another nap." He raised a small device and sprayed Zeke in the face with it. Everything went black. Chapter 6. When Zeke woke up, he was in the back seat of a large sedan, crammed between Cordell and Darius. To say he was uncomfortable was the understatement of the year. Handcuffs kept Zeke from trying to kill them both. Barely. "How was your nap?" Darius asked as he crunched on a shiny red apple. He chewed noisily in Zeke's ear. Zeke tried to work some of the stiffness from his jaw. It felt like one of them had punched him after he passed out. "Not bad," Zeke said. "I had a dream where I rammed a knife into the top of your skull." Darius took another bite of apple. "Man, I love these things. Sounds like a rather interesting dream. Shame it'll never happen." Zeke shifted uncomfortably. "That's great and all, but whose bright fucking idea was it to stuff us back here with Cordell? This guy takes up half the seat by himself." "Oh, princess," Cordell said. "Do you need a back rub?" Zeke shook his head. This ride simply couldn't be over soon enough. Fortunately, he only had to put up with another 5 minutes of Cordell's massive width and Darius's loud chewing before the vehicle pulled to a stop in front of a huge building. Another car screeched to a halt behind them. "All right, gentlemen, welcome to the airport," said the driver as he pushed the button to unlock the doors. Darius pushed the door open and slid out, then gestured for Zeke to follow. He did, with a bit of unwelcomed help from Cordell. Once Zeke stood on the sidewalk, Darius removed his handcuffs and manacles. The doors of the car behind them opened, and Sam and Eric stepped out, both giving Zeke hard stares as they approached. Eric was a tall man, taller than Zeke, but not as tall as Cordell, with gray hair and a gray beard, both trimmed short. His eyes were dark blue, above a nose made red from broken veins. He was a slender man, but moved like a predator. He wore a stylish, casual suit. Sam, on the other hand, was short and round. His dark eyes had a haunted look, and his mouth was twisted in a permanent sneer. His black hair was long and tied at the nape of his neck and matched his patchy goatee. Just jeans and a t-shirt for Sam, and both of them wrinkled. "Like I said, Sam and Eric here are going to accompany you and make sure you don't try anything stupid. And Zeke." Darius took a step closer. "Please don't try anything stupid." He tossed his apple core onto the sidewalk and moved back to the car. Eric looked down at Zeke with cold blue eyes, while Sam's mouth quirked into a grin. "I think we're going to get along just fine, aren't we?" Sam said, clapping Zeke on the shoulder with more force than necessary. Zeke's stomach boiled with anger, and lava flowed through his veins. The urge to kill was overwhelming, but trying anything before the exact right time would be a disaster. He had to plan this and make it perfect. A cold, calm slaughter. "Yeah, buddy," Zeke said to Sam. "We're gonna get along great." His tone made it clear he felt the opposite way. "All right, move it," Eric said, shoving Zeke down the sidewalk. Zeke stumbled a few steps, then turned and glared at Darius as the man closed the car door. "You haven't seen the last of me, Darius," Zeke growled. Eric loomed threateningly, while Sam pushed him again. "Come on, asshole, get moving," Sam said. "Zeke?" Darius shouted, leaning out the car window. "I'm counting on it, Zeke." With that, the car sped away, followed by the second one. "Had you cooperated from the beginning, you'd have your stuff with you," Sam said as they entered the airport terminal. "Maybe if you're lucky, Jeremy will have a spare toothbrush. He's the guy you'll be meeting with after you land in Korea." "Maybe we can help him since he's gonna do exactly as he's told," Eric said with a warning glare. "Yeah, I guess I'm feeling pretty nice today," Sam said, chuckling in the way that disturbed children did while pulling the legs off of spiders. They led Zeke to the security area where they waited in line. Zeke looked around at the crowd, at the airport, at the officers. He could snatch one of their weapons and kill both Sam and Eric before they could call anything in, but the rest of the officers would gun him down on the spot. Asking the officers for help wouldn't work either, as Sam or Eric would just call Darius and tell him. There had to be a way out of this before he got on the plane. Once he left the country, things would get much more difficult. "How do you like working for Xander?" Zeke asked. "Having the richest man in the world as a boss must be interesting. Especially when he's a scumbag." "It's pretty great, not gonna lie," Sam replied. "He's got the power and money to make things like this go smoothly. You'll see. Here we go." He pointed at the security gate. "All right, time for me to part ways. I'll phone in once the plane takes off." Sam reached in his pocket and pulled out his holophone, then gestured several times above it. "I'm gonna send you a few bucks, Zeke, so you can enjoy a beer when you get to Seoul. It'll give us more time with Amelie and Delilah." He smiled, and Eric laughed with him. "Shame I don't have my phone on me," Zeke said. "Well, in that case, I guess Eric will enjoy the beer while I enjoy Delilah." Sam showed his teeth in a cruel grin. "You're a real funny guy, aren't you?" Zeke asked. Sam gave him a greasy smile in reply. "I like you, Sam," Zeke said flatly. "I like people with a good sense of humor. That's why I'm gonna kill you last." Sam's smile faltered and slipped into a glare. "Get moving," Eric said, shoving him toward the security gate. As they approached the security gate, Eric spoke up again. "Don't let them scan your retinas. We know you aren't in the database. Tell them you have an eye infection." He handed Zeke an identification card, Zeke's own identification card, but with the name Marcus Paul on it. Odd name. Zeke took the card and stepped up to the security officer. The officer brought a handheld scanner up to Zeke's face, but Zeke ducked his head. "Sorry, man. I've got an infection going on in my eyes. It messes with the scans." He passed his new ID card to the security officer, who scanned it instead. The officer nodded, and Zeke moved forward. Eric came behind him and had no problem with the eye scanner. With a glare, Eric grabbed Zeke by the arm and pulled him toward the appropriate terminal. Zeke yanked his arm free and settled into a fast walk next to the man. There had to be a way to get rid of this bastard. An idea blossomed in Zeke's head. "Hey, let's go there," Zeke said, pointing at a small store near their terminal. "I want to take you up on that offer of a toothbrush." "Are you fucking serious?" Eric asked. He looked like he wanted to do something rather violent. "Do you really think I'm gonna spend a single dollar on you?" "Look," Zeke explained. "It's a 13-hour flight and overnight. So unless you want to wake up next to me and deal with my morning breath, I'd suggest spending a few bucks. Come on, you stingy bastard." Eric's eyes narrowed. "Fine, but make it quick." Zeke hurried through the store and grabbed a toothbrush, a small tube of toothpaste, and a pack of sleeping pills. "I have trouble sleeping on planes," he explained when Eric asked about them. He also grabbed a dark blue hat, pulled the price tag off, and slipped it on his head. Supplies in hand, they made their way through the terminal to their gate. A crowd of people filled the area, standing room only. "What seats do we have?" Zeke asked. 29A and B, Eric said, glancing at his holophone. "I get the window seat." "Fine with me," Zeke replied. They waited near the gate until the employees started calling for boarding groups. Zeke and Eric were halfway through the line and slowly moved forward. "Any baggage?" asked a pretty lady, scanning digital tickets. "Just him," Zeke said, pointing at Eric. Eric attempted a smile and scanned his holophone again. The woman handed them their boarding passes, and they walked down the tunnel toward the plane. Eric leaned down to speak to Zeke. "Open your mouth again and I'll nail it shut." Zeke struggled not to smile. Pissing off people like Eric was one of his favorite pastimes. They continued down the tunnel until they got to the plane. While Zeke had hoped he could have avoided this, at least he had a plan. "Hello and welcome aboard," a flight attendant said as they boarded the plane. Zeke gave her a smile and made his way down the aisle, slowly progressing behind the line of people until he got to row 29. There he stepped aside and let Eric slide in first, so he could get the window seat. Now, Zeke just needed some patience. A lot of patience. Not the easiest thing in his situation, but his will was like iron. Unsurprisingly, Eric was one of those assholes that took up the entire armrest. Fortunately, the seat on the other side of Zeke was occupied by a small woman in her later years. The in-flight movie sucked as well. Some tired story about a man and his dog overcoming all odds. Zeke paid it no mind and waited for the right time. After 2 hours, things finally started working his way. The flight attendants started at the front of the plane and pushed a cart, row by row, filled with drinks down the aisle. "Finally," Zeke said, rubbing his hands together. He pulled the pack of sleeping pills from his pocket and turned to Eric. "Hey, man, buy us some drinks when she comes around. Once you guys give me my holophone back, I'll repay you double. For the toothbrush and all, too." Eric eyed him warily, but finally nodded. "What do you want?" he asked. "Whiskey. Bourbon, if they've got it." The flight attendants finally came near. The one that spoke to Zeke was a pretty thing in her 20s with blonde hair tied up in a bun. Her bright blue eyes twinkled as she smiled, somehow still as friendly as could be after dealing with so many passengers. "Would you like something to drink, sir?" she asked. "Can we get 2 bourbons?" Zeke asked, pointing a thumb at Eric. "Of course, sir," she said and started rummaging through her cart for the good stuff. "I hear that blueberry seltzer is fantastic," Zeke said to the lady seated next to him. The older woman pursed her lips in thought. "Oh, really? I've never had one of those. Ma'am, can I have the blueberry seltzer?" The flight attendant produced 2 small bottles a moment later and passed them to Zeke along with 2 plastic cups. After that, she handed a can of seltzer to the old lady next to Zeke. Eric leaned over Zeke and held his holophone up, and the flight attendant scanned it to pay. While Eric leaned over him, Zeke took a handful of sleeping pills and ground them up in his cybernetic hand. He dropped the powder into one of the cups, then covered it with bourbon. He swished the liquor around in the glass, ensuring it was dissolved by the time Eric leaned back in his seat and accepted the drink. Cheers, Zeke said, offering his cup. To this job going smoothly, without any hiccups, and being back in the States in no time. Yeah, I'll drink to that, Eric said, downing his bourbon in one gulp. Zeke did the same. He tried to keep from tapping his feet or otherwise twitching, but his blood pressure felt like his veins were going to pop. This had to work. It would be a risk, but it had to work. Nature calls. Zeke excused himself half an hour later, squeezing past the old lady next to him, then made his way down the narrow aisle. When he arrived at the rear of the plane, he went to the bathroom and did his business, then stepped out and looked around. He went past the bathrooms and found the nearest flight attendant. "Excuse me," he said, and she turned around. It was the same pretty blonde woman from earlier. Amy, according to her name tag. "Do you need something, sir?" She had one of her shoes off and was rubbing her heel. "Can I get a blanket, please? I'm pretty tired and a little chilly." "Sure thing." She reached into a latched cabinet and withdrew a neatly folded blanket, then handed it to him. "Thanks," Zeke said. He waited a few moments in the aisle, then made his way back to his seat. After squeezing past the old lady, he slid back into his seat and reclined it. He unfolded the blanket and covered his legs with it. Eric said, looking down at the blanket. "I forgot they still give those out." "You want mine?" Zeke asked, grabbing it in both hands. Eric thought for a moment, then nodded. "Yeah." He covered a jaw-cracking yawn with the back of his hand. Right as Zeke was handing the blanket to Eric, an announcement came over the speakers. "Good evening, folks. This is Captain Jefferson. We're about 3.5 hours into our 13-hour flight, and we're going to be dimming the lights in a few minutes so you can get some sleep. Our flight attendants are here if you need anything, and as always, thank you for flying with..." "Finally," Eric grumbled, pulling the blanket up to his chest. He gave Zeke one last suspicious glare, then leaned his head against the wall and fell asleep. "Don't even think of trying anything," he muttered. Zeke smiled. The sleeping pills and bourbon should have him in a deep sleep in no time. Shame he couldn't have just poisoned the man, but this would work as well. Now he just had to wait for the perfect opportunity. A few minutes later, the lights dimmed. It wasn't pitch black or anything, but it was dark enough to hide what Zeke planned on doing. Mother Nature would do her thing soon enough. It took another 2 hours, but the lady next to Zeke finally got up from her seat and made her way down the aisle toward the bathrooms. Zeke grinned, then turned to Eric. Eric was in a deep sleep, occasionally snoring softly. Zeke had to move quickly. He looked around himself. The people seated in the row behind him were all asleep. The row across the aisle as well. Zeke reached over to Eric, his hands hovering a centimeter above the man's face. He took a deep breath and grabbed him. Zeke's left hand on Eric's chin and his right hand on the back of Eric's head. Eric mumbled in his sleep, but Zeke twisted as hard as he could. The strength of his cybernetic right arm made it easy, and Eric's head twisted halfway around with an audible crack. Zeke quickly moved his head back so that it was facing forward and brought the blanket up to Eric's chin. Finally, he removed his hat, the blue one he had stolen in the airport, and placed it over Eric's face. Zeke settled back into his seat and tried to get comfortable. At least he wouldn't have to worry about Eric anymore. He reached into Eric's pocket and withdrew the man's holophone, then used Eric's thumb to unlock it. Zeke scrolled through the messages and all the data on the phone. There was a lot on there that could help him. He used Eric's thumbprint one last time to add his own to it, then searched for the man's banking app. With a grin, he transferred Eric's money into his own bank account. Served him right for being such an asshole. Zeke decided to catch up on his sleep for the remainder of the flight. There was little else he could do at the moment, after all. He settled back on his chair and took a nap. Chapter 7. People tend to empty their bowels shortly after they die. That was something Zeke was reminded of just before the plane landed. Fortunately, Eric's corpse had the decency to hold off for most of the flight, but eventually let loose. The smell was quite awful. Zeke tried his best to imply it came from the row behind them. As soon as the plane landed and the seatbelt sign turned off, Zeke politely pushed past the elderly woman next to him, with apologies of course, and hurried down the aisle, slipping past all the people trying to get their luggage. Quite a few of them cursed at him, and one man stood in place, refusing to let him pass. The strength of Zeke's cybernetic grip on that man's wrist made him think twice. As he approached the front of the plane where the flight attendants could see, he stopped and waited in line, slowly filing out. Best not to draw any extra attention to himself. There were few things that could be worse than landing in an international airport with a corpse, especially a corpse that had just shit itself. Zeke's only saving grace was that he flew under an alias. Still, it was problematic to say the least. Exiting the plane and walking up the tunnel to the airport terminal only took a matter of seconds, but it felt like hours. He pulled out Eric's holophone and dialed Sydney's number, thankful that it was so easy to remember. She didn't answer. Someone screamed back on the plane, then a second person. He sent a message to Sydney saying it was Zeke, then called her again. This time she answered after the fourth ring. Her hair hung in loose waves, and she stifled a yawn with a slender hand. "Zeke? Why are you using someone else's phone?" "Some guy named Eric," she asked. "I'll explain later, Sydney. This is an emergency with a capital I'm fucked. Are you near your setup, or any computer for that matter?" "Yeah," she replied. "I'm home. What's going on?" "Okay, I promise I'll explain, and if I get through this, I'll pay you with whatever I can. I'm in Seoul right now, in the airport. Incheon International." He suddenly thought of the people around him and turned the hologram off. He pulled the phone up to his ear. "I need you to get into their security server and erase me from any and all cameras. Same with Luckhaven about 13 hours ago." That's a pretty tall order with no warning," she replied, sounding rather annoyed. "He'll definitely be paying me for this one." At that moment, Eric's phone chimed. Zeke looked down at it and saw a message from Sam. "Let me know when you land. Darius keeps pestering me." At the same time, a message came through from someone named Jeremy. "I'm waiting in baggage claim 4. Blue t-shirt." When Zeke brought the phone back up to his ear, he heard Sydney typing. "So how long do you think it'll take?" he asked her. She replied after a moment. "Zeke, I just want to emphasize exactly how lucky you are. If we didn't smuggle things from Seoul to Luckhaven on a regular basis, you would be completely fucked. Even I wouldn't be able to get in there and erase footage of you for probably a solid day or two." "So you can?" Zeke asked excitedly as he hurried through the terminal. "I have fake employees on each airport's respective domains," Sydney explained. "Getting domain admin is pretty easy from those. It should be done within half an hour. Hopefully that's enough time for you." "Thanks, Sydney. I'm gonna make this up to you. Let me call you back in a few." "Okay, Zeke. Stay safe." 2 security guards ran in the opposite direction as Zeke, heading toward the gate from which he had left. Zeke quickly stepped into a tourist shop and grabbed the first shirt in his size. It was a pink t-shirt with an anime character on the front. He paid with Eric's holophone, then hurried to the nearest bathroom. Once there, he stepped into one of the stalls and pulled his black shirt off, then pulled the tags off of the new shirt and put it on. He checked himself in the mirror and laughed. "Pink-clad assassin," Zeke muttered to himself as he stepped out of the bathroom. On his way out, he stuffed his old shirt into the trash can. He pulled Eric's phone from his pocket and sent a message to Jeremy. "He'll be down there in a few minutes. Idiot's wearing a pink t-shirt. You can't miss him. I'm gonna go catch some hookers and I'll meet up with you later." Hopefully that would sate Jeremy for the time being. Remembering the other message, he sent a reply to Sam. "Plane just landed. Everything's going smoothly so far. He's cooperating. Tell Darius to relax." Zeke continued to follow the signs overhead as he made his way through the airport. A group of policemen hurried by in the opposite direction. Zeke's jaw clenched as he realized how close he was to all of this being ruined. The sooner he could get out of here, the better. He pulled out Eric's holophone and dialed Sydney again. She answered after the first ring. Her hair was tied up this time, and she was focused on her keyboard. "I'm taking care of it now, Zeke, don't worry. I never worry with you, Sydney. I just wanted to give you a better explanation of what was going on. Okay, hit me with it. Zeke took a deep breath and opened his mouth to speak, then decided to turn the hologram off again. He brought the phone up to his ear and covered his mouth with his other hand. I've been hired to assassinate someone here in Seoul. Someone big. Xander Kinnear is paying Pascal and Sewa for this. Only to make sure everything goes smoothly, he had his goons kidnap Amelie and Delilah as a sort of insurance. I don't believe Pascal or Sewa are any part of the kidnapping. What? She asked in disbelief. Yeah, I'm in a shit situation, and I gotta play ball or else they'll kill my girls. Zeke? Sydney sounded flustered now. What the hell? Why would they do that? Because Xander values money more than he values humanity, Zeke replied. He truly doesn't care if he hurts people. Remember, this is the same guy that had me tortured for sticking my nose in his business a year ago. He just wants me to murder the competition. Wait, who is your target? Zeke grunted a laugh. Sang-hoon Park, the head of Jinshil Corp. Sydney made a strangled noise. What? Zeke went on. Don't get me wrong, I plan on killing the bastard. It's the least I can do for all the carnage his synth caused and the people we lost. But after that, I'm hunting down every single one of these fucks and making them pay. I'm here with you, Zeke, Sydney said without hesitation. Every step of the way, I'll be here with you. I knew I could count on you, Sydney, Zeke said. He considered making a joke about her really earning her ticket to Belize, but decided now wasn't the best time for jokes. I'll call you later. I'm about to meet up with my contact here. What was all that about the security cameras on the airport? What did you do? You never told me. She was still typing in the background. Zeke paused for a moment. They had a guy fly with me to make sure I didn't try to escape or change the plan or anything. I killed him on the plane. I'm talking on his holophone right now. Good, Sydney replied. Although that means he'll be on the news. Shit, I'm gonna have my work cut out for me, making sure that story doesn't get out. Or if it does, that no one knows his name. Time for me to get to work. I'll talk to you soon. With that, she ended the call. Zeke slipped the holophone into his pocket and hurried toward the baggage claim area. When he got there, he pushed through the dense crowd of people as he looked for the 4th reclaim carousel. A crowd of mostly Korean people filled the area, although none were at Zeke's carousel yet. He had arrived before anyone else from his flight. An older man wearing a shirt celebrating Korea's reunification bumped into him and immediately apologized. Zeke slipped through the crowd and saw a tall man in a blue shirt. He was American, that much was clear from first glance, with short blonde hair and brown eyes. That must be Jeremy. He stood there with his arms crossed, right in everyone's way. He wasn't a particularly large man, only slightly heavier than Zeke. Zeke walked up to him. Hey, you Jeremy? Jeremy looked at Zeke and nodded. Yeah, where's Eric? Zeke shrugged. He kept telling me about the hookers here and how excited he was. I believe the way he described it was he'll be up to his neck in poontang until his flight home. Jeremy rolled his eyes. Typical. He's probably heading to Itaewon. That's fine. We don't need him anyways. Come on, let's get this done. Time's short. Nice shirt. He laughed and jerked his head to the side, and Zeke followed. Together they passed through baggage claim and made their way out of the terminal. After crossing a road, they walked toward the parking lot. Jeremy didn't say much and answered most questions with little more than a grunt. Zeke hated him almost immediately. On a whim, he pulled out Eric's holophone and switched it to silent. When they got to Jeremy's car, he directed Zeke to get in. He turned the car on and started explaining the details of their mission. Go to save location 1, he told the car, then continued. Okay, so here's the deal. Sang-hoon Park has a meeting this afternoon with some execs from... Well, I don't know who they work for, and I don't care. What matters is that he's gonna be in a conference room in a nearby hotel for this. Why not in his own building? Is something going on? Zeke asked. Yeah, I think he's meeting some new clients or trying to win over potential ones, Jeremy explained. So they're in a high-end conference room in a hotel building with some fancy food catered and all that. My guess is these guys are potential buyers. The reason this is important is twofold. First, we actually know his schedule, which helps immensely. And second, the room has panoramic windows. Excellent view of the Han River. From our vantage point, it'll be an easy shot.
Zeke thought for a moment.
I'm guessing we're heading there right now?
Jeremy nodded.
You guessed correctly, Mr. Pink Shirt. I already have everything we need in the trunk. You're doing the job, then I'm getting you right back on the plane back to the States.
Zeke barked a laugh.
Man, you guys are quick. No wasted time, eh? Just in and out. You're not here on fucking vacation, Zeke. You're here to kill someone,
Jeremy growled. Zeke thought on that sentence for a bit.
Oh, don't worry. I know.
They continued over a bridge, and where the bridge met with land on the far side gave Zeke an idea. He tucked it away for later, when he would need it. For now, he had to focus on the task at hand. Jeremy busied himself with staring at the buildings through his window, so Zeke pulled Eric's phone out and sent a quick message to Sydney.
I'll be able to call soon.
She replied almost immediately.
I'm just glad you're safe.
She punctuated the statement with a few hearts, which brought a smile to Zeke's face. Looks like Amelie had the right idea, wanting to bring Sydney into their little family.
So how's this going off?
Zeke asked as they entered downtown Seoul. Towering skyscrapers lined each side of the street, with more cheap plastic signs and advertisements than he could count. People filled the sidewalks, and cars clogged the streets, even worse than in Luckhaven. Traffic moved at a crawl.
Simple, Jeremy said, turning a corner. We're going to the building next to him, and you're gonna vaporize his head. I told you, this job is already put together. We've been working on it for weeks, so you can just step in and do your part.
Zeke suppressed the urge to groan. Based on that comment, he had an idea what was going to happen, and he knew exactly how he was going to get them back. Chapter 8. Cordell pushed the truck door open and stepped out onto the street. He didn't fit too well in most vehicles, but this rental truck was large enough that he had actually been quite comfortable. That was a rare luxury. His trip from the airport to his current destination had been an enjoyable one, made even more so by the truck's excellent stereo. Overall, a great way to start the night. A luxury car was parked in the driveway. He strolled up the driveway and pulled a small device from his pocket. After opening the charging port on the car, he plugged the device in with an audible click. Several lights flashed, then it began to go to work. With a satisfied nod, Cordell moved toward the house's front door. It was a nice house, probably more than 200 years old and 3 stories high, made from brick. Cordell wouldn't mind something like it for himself, though with a few modifications. Weighing 200 kilograms tended to alter daily activities a bit. He knocked firmly 3 times and waited. Patience wasn't something that came naturally to him, but it was required for this job. Over the years, he had gone from antsy and irritable to a man that could outweight a rock. Eventually, the door opened and a gray-haired man stood there, looking wide-eyed at Cordell.
Jim,
Cordell exclaimed, taking a step forward and pushing his way into the house.
It's so good to see you, Jim. How's the family?
What the?
Get out of here, Martha! Call the police!
Jim staggered back a few steps, looking around. His eyes went to a baseball bat leaning next to the door jamb. Cordell drew a pistol and leveled it at the man.
That can't happen. Tell her everything is okay.
Jim glared at Cordell, but finally raised his voice and called out.
Never mind. Everything is okay, Martha. Go back to sleep.
Very good, Senator Talmonth, Cordell said. Why don't you have a seat over there? He pointed with his pistol at the couch. Jim kept his eyes on Cordell's gun and slowly walked over to the couch. He sat stiffly, eyes filled with anger and concern. Cordell sat in a chair across from him.
Look, just let me get my wallet and you can be on your way. No one needs to get hurt,
Jim began. He stopped when Cordell laughed.
You misunderstand me, Jim. I'm not here for your money. Although perhaps we could have a little discussion about the topic of money. Like, for example, why you wouldn't accept it when my boss offered you a rather substantial sum.
Senator Talmonth's brows lowered.
Because I'm not for sale, that's why. Money in politics has done a good job of ruining this country. Far too many of my colleagues are practically owned by lobbyists and corporations, but not me. I work for the American people.
Cordell set his pistol on his lap and clapped his hands.
Bravo, Senator. Excellent speech. I admire your steadfast honesty and dedication to your constituents. Really, I do. Unfortunately, I'm in a different business. When Mr. Kinnear sends me to do something, it's usually to deal with someone that wouldn't listen.
So you think you're going to threaten me into accepting his bribe? Jim asked, his face screwed into a scowl. Since apparently you're fucking deaf, I feel I need to repeat what I just said. I'm not for sale.
Cordell shook his head. You should be. Life would certainly be easier for you if you were, and your bank account would thank you. He sighed. Instead, now I'm here and things have to be considerably less pleasant.
Senator Talmonth's posture slumped as he realized what was going to happen. Cordell loved that part. That very moment when a person realized that he was there to kill them and they couldn't escape.
Can I make a request?
The aging senator asked. His voice had lost some of its vigor.
You can always make a request,
Cordell replied.
Not in front of my family. Do it outside. Preferably somewhere where they won't see my body. I don't want my son to see it.
Cordell looked down at his pistol, then back at Jim and feigned surprise.
Oh, you think I'm gonna shoot you? No, I'm not gonna shoot you, Senator. As long as you don't try anything stupid, at least.
At that moment, a woman walked into the living room. She was a few years younger than Senator Talmonth, with graying hair and sharp eyes. She was still quite pretty for her age. She held a robe closed with both hands, and her eyes went wide when she saw Cordell seated in the chair with a gun. Cordell pointed the gun at her.
So, you must be Martha. Have a seat, Martha.
Cordell pointed with his gun at a spot on the couch next to the senator. She nodded and shuffled over, her face a mask of barely reined-in panic. When she sat next to her husband, she immediately hugged him tightly and let out a sob. He took her hand in his and whispered to her to stay strong. Cordell decided to let them have that moment. It would make the rest of this so much more fun, if they held on to hope.
What do you want? Martha asked, her eyes on the gun. Me? Not much. My boss, though, he wants some things. He wanted Jim here to accept some money and vote on a few recently proposed bills, but it appears Jim can't be bought. So I'm here to punish him.
Are you going to shoot us?
She asked.
Cordell gave her a toothy grin.
I would prefer not to. In fact, I have a much better idea. How about you two grab your son and go for a little drive? I'll just mess some things up here. You won't have anything else to worry about.
Technically, it wasn't a lie. Martha nodded. Her eyes were still glued to Cordell's pistol. As long as you're not going to shoot us, I'll go get our son, she said, pushing herself off the couch.
Don't try anything stupid, Martha,
Cordell said, following her with his pistol. She hurried from the living room and raced up the stairs. Cordell turned back to Senator Talmonth.
I just hope you've learned from this ordeal, Jim. It's good to stand your ground at times. Really, it is. Just not against my boss. You should be more like your colleagues sometimes.
Senator Talmonth's face darkened.
My colleagues are scumbags and cowards that have sold out the American people. You can threaten me and wave your gun all you'd like, mister. But when I became senator, I swore an oath, and I intend to keep that oath.
Cordell gave him his best grin and waited patiently until Martha came back into the living room holding the hand of her son. He was a boy of around 8 or 10 or so, and rubbed his eyes while complaining about how late it was. Cordell lowered his pistol. No need to scare the child unnecessarily. Screaming kids were always problematic, so best to avoid that.
Very good, Cordell said. Now, let's all go outside. You folks just go for a little drive, okay? This will all be done before you know it."
Martha kept herself between Cordell and her son as she walked toward her husband. Together, the three of them made their way to the front door.
"What's going on?" "I'm tired," their son said. "We're just going to take a short drive," Senator Talmadge told him. "You'll be back in bed soon, buddy." "Touching," Cordell said. "Go on, out the door."
The senator glared at Cordell as he held the door for his family. Martha stifled another sob as they hurried to the car parked in the driveway. Cordell couldn't wipe the grin off of his face. He was so excited for this part. His pulse quickened.
"That's it. Go ahead,"
he told them as they opened the car doors and got inside. Cordell pulled a remote from his pocket, roughly the size of his holophone. Once they were all inside the car, he pressed a button, locking the doors. Surprise flashed on Jim's face as he grabbed the car door and pulled. It didn't budge. Cordell slowly approached them.
"You see, Jim, my hope is that whoever takes your place will remember this. He'll see you were stupid enough to try to investigate my boss. No one fights against Mr. Kinnear and wins. You should have been smart enough to know that, but—"
He trailed off and shrugged.
"No worries. We have a solution for that."
Cordell pushed another button on the remote, and Senator Talmadge's car turned on. From within, Martha began to panic. She screamed, and Jim reached over and tried to calm her. Their son began to cry in the back seat.
"And here we go,"
Cordell said, using the remote. The car backed down the driveway slowly, with Cordell walking next to it. It took him a couple tries to get the car to pull onto the street correctly, but soon it sat there, ready to go. Notably, none of the Talmadges wore their seatbelts. Oh, Martha certainly tried to fasten hers, but it wouldn't latch. In a few minutes, they would learn that their airbags didn't work either.
"You live on such a wonderfully straight road,"
Cordell said as he stepped next to their car. Martha and their son were openly crying, while Jim tried his best to calm them. Cordell could see the look in his eyes, though. Jim knew they were all going to die.
"Xander Kinnear sends his regards,"
Cordell told them with a polite wave. With a press of the button, their car rocketed forward at full throttle. Them living on such a straight road did have a major advantage. It allowed their car to reach very high speeds in a short period of time. Unfortunately, the steering wheel didn't work, no matter how much Jim twisted it. Cordell wished he could have seen the looks on their faces right as they crashed into a telephone pole at more than 200 kilometers per hour. After pressing another button, the small device he had attached to their car exploded. It wasn't particularly powerful, but it was enough to ensure there were no survivors. He hopped into his rental truck and watched through his windshield for a moment as flames slowly spread across the outside of Senator Talmadge's car. Smoke began to billow from the interior, pouring out from the shattered windows. When the battery caught, it would be hard to put out. Satisfied with his work, he turned the truck on and left. It really was quite nice. He would have to consider getting one soon. His own truck was a few years old and ready for replacement. Cordell smiled as he drove toward the airport. He needed to get back to Luck Haven quick. His next task involved a man he had wanted to kill for quite some time. Chapter 9. Jeremy pulled his car down a ramp that led to a parking garage at the base of a skyscraper. A thick steel bar blocked the way. He pulled up next to a small terminal and scanned a badge. After a beep of confirmation, the bar lifted out of the way. He continued into the parking garage, slowly passing through the rows of cars until he reached the back.
"Okay, get out. Time to get this done,"
he said as he stepped out of the car.
"Are you finally going to fill me in on the details now?"
Zeke asked as he did the same.
"Yeah, I guess,"
Jeremy grumbled. Zeke couldn't help but think that Jeremy was the least charismatic person he had ever met. They met at the rear of the car. Jeremy opened the trunk and withdrew 2 sets of coveralls, one of which he threw at Zeke.
"Put this on,"
he instructed. Zeke stepped into the coveralls and pulled them on over his clothes, while Jeremy did his best to explain what was supposed to happen.
"We're on the maintenance crew,"
Jeremy said as he pulled 2 toolboxes from his trunk.
He set one in front of Zeke. Your plasma rifle is in there. No one really watches too closely what maintenance does. We can go wherever, and people just assume we belong there. He clipped a badge on the front of his coveralls and handed Zeke one. Marcus, Zeke said, tracing his finger over the name embroidered on his coveralls. I knew a guy named Marcus once. No one cares. Put this on, Jeremy said, handing Zeke a hat. Zeke put the hat on as Jeremy pulled out a similar one and put it on. The hat projected new features onto Jeremy's face. The differences were subtle, but it made him look like a completely different person. All right, let's do this, Jeremy said, grabbing his toolbox. Zeke reached down and grabbed his toolbox, then waited on Jeremy to lock his car. Together they crossed the parking lot and entered the bottom floor of the luxury apartment building. Just look like you belong here, Jeremy said quietly as they crossed the lobby. People will almost never question you if you just look like you belong. Probably the most valuable lesson I ever learned. He stopped in front of the elevators and pushed the call button. A bead of sweat ran down the middle of Zeke's back. He reminded himself that he had a different face and an alibi, but the seriousness of this situation was really starting to set in. It was a rare thing indeed that he felt any type of cold feet before a job, but he was in a foreign country, and the loves of his life had been kidnapped, so needless to say, he was not in his usual headspace. Here we go, Jeremy said when the elevator doors opened. They both stepped onto the elevator, and Jeremy pressed the button for the 45th floor. Fortunately, they were the only ones on the elevator. The doors closed, and it began to ascend. Zeke set his toolbox down and rolled his neck in a circle, doing his best to loosen a few knots. I'm assuming you're a good shot with a rifle, Jeremy said. They wouldn't have hired you otherwise. Yeah, Zeke said. I'd place myself solidly above average. He squatted down a few times and touched his toes. He wanted his body warmed up and ready to go for what he was planning. Plus, it helped take his mind off of the fucking prick in the elevator with him. Good. Because it goes without saying that you only get one shot, then we have to hurry the fuck out of here. And if you fuck this up, I'll be dealing with you. I figured that much, Zeke said, taking a few deep breaths. He rolled his head one way, then the other. The elevator chimed as it reached the 45th floor. After the doors opened, they both stepped out into a room with concrete walls that held giant breaker panels, air conditioning units, and all the rest of the shit maintenance crews kept out of sight. They weaved around a work table and made their way to a heavy steel door that led to the roof. Jeremy pulled out his holophone and checked the time, then nodded. We're right on time. Go ahead and get your rifle ready, Jeremy said as he set his toolbox on the floor and opened it. Zeke opened his toolbox and looked inside. It held a plasma rifle broken down into 3 parts. He grabbed the stock and held it in one hand, then slid the receiver in until 4 pins clicked and held it into place. Then he retrieved the heavy barrel from the bottom of the toolbox and slid it into place, twisting it until it locked. A scope was in the bottom of the toolbox as well, so Zeke grabbed that and slid it into place, then twisted the thumb screws until they were tight. Jeremy, on the other hand, pulled a small backpack from his toolbox, as well as a pistol. After that, he grabbed a small white cloth and threw it to Zeke, who caught it midair. Make sure you wipe your fingerprints off everything you touch. Don't be a dumbass and get caught, Jeremy said as he slid his arms through the straps of the backpack. What's that? Zeke asked. This, Jeremy said as he hefted the pistol. This is to make sure you do your job. He jerked his thumb toward the backpack. And this is a parachute, in case things go tits up and I need to escape. No parachute for me? Zeke asked, although he already knew the answer. Nope, so I guess you'd better focus. He raised his security badge and swiped it in front of the door, then pulled it open. Let's get this done and get the fuck out of here. Zeke turned the rifle on and waited a moment for the lights to indicate a successful self-check, then nodded. He went through the door with Jeremy in tow. A set of stairs was ahead, and he hurried up them. The door at the top of the stairs led onto the roof. Zeke pushed the door open and stepped out onto the roof. The moment his foot touched the surface, a gust of wind knocked him to the side. He closed his eyes and tried to will his heart rate below 200. What's the matter? You afraid of heights? Jeremy asked, moving on to the roof behind him.
Yeah, actually, Zeke said. And gusts of wind when I'm on top of a building don't help.
Ah, poor baby. Over here.
Jeremy pointed to one side of the roof with his pistol.
You should have a clear shot from there. I'll tell you where to look.
Why don't you just shoot the man? Zeke asked as he followed Jeremy to the edge of the roof, where a waist-high railing kept them from falling over the edge.
Because I'm not a good shot like you are, Jeremy said. I'm just the security guy.
Down. He pointed to the floor with his pistol. Zeke grunted and lowered himself to the surface of the roof into a prone position. He studied the building next to them, a massive hotel that stood half a dozen stories higher than them. Jeremy knelt next to him and pointed at the hotel towards the top.
You see those big-ass windows? 2 floors from the top?
Zeke squinted against the sunlight.
Yeah, I see 'em. Keep your eyes focused on the left one. Bach is in there.
Zeke pulled the rifle against his shoulder and put his eye against the scope. The panoramic window of the hotel leapt into view, and he slowly swept the rifle from side to side, trying to catch a solid view of the room. A dozen men in expensive suits mingled in that conference room, many with glasses of champagne in hand. One man kept gesturing towards a screen on the wall, upon which a video was playing showing graphs and charts. 2 others stood there, nodding appreciatively.
I guess now would be a good time to ask what Park looks like, Zeke said. I don't think I've ever actually seen the man before. Dipshit, Jeremy grunted. Everyone in that room probably looks 30 years old and in perfect shape. Look for a pudgy 60-year-old. He scoffed. You should have fucking known that much.
Maybe someone should have told me, Zeke muttered. Zeke found him quickly enough. He was half a head shorter than everyone else and balding at that. Small glasses perched on his nose, and his belly pushed the waist of his suit out considerably. Also of note, he had a hard glare, visible even through the scope. The man looked to be trying to stare holes through everyone.
Found him.
Zeke placed his finger on the trigger. He heard Jeremy rack the slide on his pistol and looked up. Jeremy was pointing the gun right at Zeke's head.
Just making sure you don't back out, Jeremy said with a shrug.
Yeah, no pressure or anything, Zeke said as he put his eye back to the scope of the rifle. He found Park again and steadied the rifle. Sang-Hoon Park's glare swept the room, and the man took a step toward the window. Perfect. He clasped his hands behind his back and looked at the city below, then brought his gaze to the roof of the apartment building next door, right where Zeke and Jeremy were. Fuck. Sang-Hoon's eyes widened, and he opened his mouth to say something. His hand raised, and he pointed at Zeke. Zeke squeezed the trigger. The rifle made a faint humming noise. There was no recoil, but the side of Sang-Hoon Park's head vaporized in an instant, sending a mist of blood across the walls and ceiling. A small hole had been burned into the window in front of him. Chaos enveloped the room as people realized what had just occurred. People screamed and ran, struggling to leave the room. One man pulled out his holophone and began dialing, probably calling the cops.
Time for us to leave,
Zeke said, shuffling further away from the edge of the roof. He looked up and saw Jeremy holstering his pistol.
Is he dead?
Jeremy asked, holding out his hand.
Yep, just like you wanted,
Zeke said as he handed over the rifle. Jeremy put the rifle to his shoulder and looked through the scope. A moment later, he gave a satisfied grunt and lowered it.
Yeah, he's dead all right. They're really freaking out over there. Time for us to get the hell out of here.
Jeremy lowered the rifle and reached for his pistol. Were Zeke a more honorable man, he would have given Jeremy an opportunity to fight fairly, or perhaps escape. If they hadn't kidnapped Zeke's girlfriends, he would have worked with the man, talked to him, appealed to whatever sense of humanity he had within, figured out some deal that might have satisfied them both. But things were very different. As Jeremy lowered the rifle, Zeke's right hand lashed out, striking like a cobra. His fist struck Jeremy right in the throat. Before Jeremy even had the chance to wheeze, Zeke's left hand grabbed the front of the man's coveralls and snatched him forward. Zeke slammed his head into Jeremy's nose, splattering it in a shower of blood. Jeremy fell to the floor, clutching at his throat and struggling to breathe. He reached for his pistol, which had fallen after he had been hit, but Zeke kicked it and sent it skittering 2 meters away. His hand was still on the rifle, so he tried to raise it and point it at Zeke, but Zeke snatched it out of his hands. "You really think you can fuck with Amelie and Delilah and I won't do something about it?" Zeke asked as he stepped over to grab Jeremy's pistol. He grabbed it and knelt down next to Jeremy, pointing the pistol in his face. "Hard to breathe, huh?" Zeke asked. "Maybe you should make better life choices, Jeremy. You wouldn't find yourself in this position if you hadn't been part of this plan to fuck me over. Give me your holophone." Jeremy finally managed 2 wheezing breaths. When he didn't move, Zeke placed the barrel next to the man's temple. After a moment, Jeremy reached into his pocket and withdrew his phone, then handed it to Zeke. "Isn't that better?" Zeke asked after Jeremy took another few choking breaths. "Unlock your phone." He held the phone out, and Jeremy placed his thumb on it. Zeke quickly went through and changed the password on the phone. "They're gonna kill you women," Jeremy finally managed to say between gasps for breath. "That's where you're wrong," Zeke said, "and you're gonna help me with that. Whoever your point of contact is, send them a message telling them I completed the job and you're taking me back to the airport." "If I do that, will you let me go?" Jeremy asked, receiving the phone from Zeke. He looked up at Zeke like a wounded dog. "Yeah, I'll let you go," Zeke said coldly. He watched as Jeremy sent the message, then handed the phone back. "Take the parachute off. You won't need it." Jeremy coughed and eyed Zeke warily, but removed the parachute. He muttered under his breath about how much his face hurt the entire time. Blood from his shattered nose covered his mouth and neck. Zeke heard the faint, yet unmistakable sound of sirens approaching in the distance. Looks like cops were fast in this country. He wasn't quite sure how far away they were, but he knew his time just ran out. "Fuck!" he shouted. "Okay, time for plan B." He stuffed the pistol in the pocket of his coveralls. Seeing this, Jeremy relaxed a bit. He let out an audible sigh, although with his damaged throat, it came out as a hoarse wheeze. "It's gonna be tough. Getting away from the pigs here," Jeremy said. "There were a lot of them, and they're quick bastards." "Yeah, I'll have my work cut out for me, that's for sure," Zeke said, squinting as he tried to pinpoint where the sirens came from. "You'll be fine, though." Jeremy turned and looked a question at Zeke. In reply, Zeke struck him square in the face, sending Jeremy staggering back with a bloodied gash on his forehead. "Ah!" Jeremy yelped as he backed into the railing. "What the fuck, man?" Zeke punched him in the gut as hard as he could, doubling him over. Jeremy's arms flailed, trying to fend off Zeke's blows. Zeke slapped his hands aside and punched him in the side of the head, crumpling the man against the railing. When Jeremy hit the roof, Zeke kicked him square in the stomach. "Here's a bit of advice," Zeke said, kneeling next to Jeremy. "If you fuck with me or my women, you can expect me to hit back. Hard. And newsflash, dickhead, I'm far more ruthless than any of you." Jeremy writhed on the ground, struggling to breathe. Zeke placed his boot against Jeremy's hip and pushed hard, sending the man's legs over the edge. Jeremy's eyes snapped open, and he grabbed onto the railing. Only his grip kept him from plummeting to the ground. Zeke bent down and grabbed onto Jeremy's wrist. He squeezed, the strength of his cybernetic hand crushing the bones in Jeremy's wrist. Jeremy screamed in pain, but managed to hold on. "Zeke!" Jeremy shouted, looking at the ground beneath him wild-eyed. "You said you were gonna let me go!" Zeke savagely pulled Jeremy's other hand from the railing so that he was the only thing holding Jeremy up. He looked him dead in the eyes. "You're right," Zeke said, and let go. Jeremy screamed as he slid down the short, angled portion of the roof, then fell over the edge. Zeke didn't stay to watch. He pulled the small cloth from his pocket that Jeremy had given him earlier and started rubbing down the rifle and the toolbox, removing any trace of his fingerprints from them. That done, he grabbed the parachute and strapped it on. "Why do I always find myself in these situations?" Zeke asked himself as he stepped up to the railing. At least this time he had a parachute. He had never used one before, so he hoped the learning curve wasn't too steep. He reached back and made sure he felt exactly where the ripcord was. Shaking his head at his own stupidity, he placed a boot on the railing and tried to ignore how much his head swam at the drop before him. Flashing lights on the street reflected in windows as police vehicles surrounded the area. He took a deep breath and jumped. Chapter 10. The wind rushed in Zeke's ears almost as loudly as his own heartbeat as he raced toward the ground. He pulled the ripcord and the canopy fluttered for a few terrifying seconds before finally catching. Zeke's heart tried to beat its way out of his chest, but he forced himself to breathe calmly, well, mostly, and grabbed the brake loops. He pulled on the loops in turn, steering him side to side between buildings. The ground still rushed at him dangerously fast, but there wasn't much he could do about that. Zeke focused on steering the parachute away from the building, and more importantly, away from the police. The cops were centered around the entrance to the apartment building, so Zeke focused on getting as far away from there as possible. He flew between buildings, over crowds of people pointing with excitement, and crossed as many side streets as he could. It was a breezy day, so block by city block passed beneath his feet as he sped south. The ground was rapidly approaching, and Zeke suddenly realized he didn't know how to land. Sure, he had seen videos before, but that was nothing compared to actually doing it. His luck, he would hit the pavement and break a leg. A terrible idea blossomed in his mind, and he decided to go with it. Pulling on the left brake loop, he steered himself over the busy street. Traffic was busy enough that the cars weren't going too fast, roughly the same speed as him. He guided himself right on top of a small delivery truck and miraculously landed in the bed. That had been much easier than he had feared. Of course, the moment the driver realized someone had parachuted into the bed of his truck, he slammed on the brake pedal. Zeke flew forward and collided with the cab, nearly bashing his face against the metal. He tumbled like a piece of trash in the wind, and the parachute settled over the truck, blanketing them all in near darkness. The car behind them didn't stop in time and crashed into the truck, nearly sending Zeke flying out of the bed. He hurried, unfastened the parachute, fumbling with the straps. After that, he double-checked his hat, making sure his disguise was still active. All around him, voices shouted, but Zeke didn't speak Korean. He had to make sure no one was calling the police, so he pulled Jeremy's holophone out as he fumbled with the parachute. "Translate that into English," Zeke said, holding the phone up so it could catch all the shouts. He hurried out of the bed of the truck while the phone translated. "What the fuck is wrong with you? Fucking idiot! You son of a dog! My truck! Fuck your—" "Okay, that's enough," Zeke said, finally breaking free of the parachute. Traffic had screeched to a halt, so he ran between cars, trying to put precious space between him and the growing crowd of people surrounding the parachute. His pistol banged around in his pocket, colliding with his hip at every step. The cars were stopped at a red light, which meant Zeke was able to sprint to the front line. A taxi sat there, waiting for the light. Zeke pulled the rear door open and slid inside. The driver immediately began cursing at him. A young woman sat on the back seat and yelped when Zeke entered. He held up his hands in a calming gesture, but made his intentions clear. "Get out," he said in a voice that brooked no nonsense. She complained rather loudly, but opened the door and ran. Zeke grabbed Jeremy's holophone again. "Translate this into Korean," he said to the phone. "Let's go to the airport. Now." He held the holophone up so the driver could hear it. "비한지에 가자," the phone said. "지금." The driver turned around and glared at him. Zeke pulled out his pistol and made it clearly visible, but didn't point it at the driver. He had the phone repeat the message and then added, "I'll pay you," to sweeten the deal. The driver glared at him but nodded. He slammed his foot on the accelerator, not waiting for the light to turn green. He swerved between a few cars that blocked the intersection, hammering on his horn the entire time, and they were off. "Tell him to drive fast and I'll pay double," Zeke told Jeremy's holophone, and it translated the message for him. The driver kept shooting wary glances in his rearview mirror, but he raced as quickly as possible through the crowded city, using driveways, alleys, and sometimes even the sidewalk to avoid other cars. Zeke allowed himself to relax just a bit. Park was dead, so his job was done. Now it was time to get back to the States and get his girls back.
He pulled out Eric's phone and dialed Sydney's number. After a few rings, a hologram of her appeared above the phone. "Zeke, give me an update. Since you're calling me, I'm assuming you're okay." She was staring at something in front of her, probably a computer monitor. "I guess you could say that," Zeke replied. "I just parachuted from the top of an apartment building." Sydney paused for a moment and looked down at the holophone. "What?" "Yeah, the job is done, though." That would lighten her mood a bit, at least. Sydney sighed heavily. "So Park is dead?" "Yep. At least there's that. May he rot in hell. Anyways, I took care of the cameras for you at the airport." She went back to typing. "Okay, perfect," Zeke said. "Because I'm heading back there right now. I guess you could just consider it job security, right?" "I'd laugh if your life wasn't on the line," she replied, then reached up and gestured in front of her monitor. "Okay, so what are we doing now? I can loop the security cameras if you tell me what terminal you're heading to and what flight." "Let me check real quick," Zeke said as he pulled the holophone down and began checking messages and emails. He found the tickets for his flight into the country, and right next to that he found his flight out of Korea. He quickly relayed the relevant information to Sydney, and she got to work. "They really didn't give you much time, did they?" Sydney asked with a chuckle. "Yeah, it's not a vacation, or so I was told. They had a guy there with me, making sure I completed the job, as if I needed any extra incentive. I think he was planning on shooting me once I was done." "Huh. What did you do with him?" "I let him go," Zeke said. "I took care of fingerprints too, don't worry. Although I don't have any fingerprints on my right hand, which makes that easy." "Aren't they gonna find out their guys are dead?" Sydney asked. Zeke smiled. "I have both of their holophones, and I've been sending messages from them. It should be good enough for a day or two, long enough for me to get home and save the girls." "You'd better save them," Sydney said, her face suddenly serious. "I'm finally getting a second chance with Amelie. I can't lose her again." "Don't worry, I'll do whatever it takes," Zeke replied. "I guess I'd rather not lose you and Delilah before I even get to know you. So, don't die, Zeke." Her lips curved into a sassy smile. "Working on it. I'm paying this taxi driver double to get me to the airport as quickly as possible, and I think he's broken every traffic law in existence." Zeke grunted as the driver jerked the car to the side to avoid a rickety motorcycle clogging the lane. "Well, tell him not to wreck. Unless wrecking is somehow faster. No telling with how this guy drives." Zeke chuckled. "Okay, beautiful. I'm gonna need a ride when I arrive back in Luckhaven. Think you can pick me up?" Sydney smiled. "Zeke, I can always give you a ride." Despite the situation Zeke was in, he grinned. Sydney was all right. "We'll discuss that when I get back to the States. For now, I'm gonna let you go. I'll call you when I land in Luckhaven." "And then we're gonna go get your women back." "Sorry, our women." "Exactly." Zeke told her goodbye and ended the phone call. The taxi raced across a large bridge, and Zeke got an idea. He still had the pistol in his hand, and he definitely couldn't bring that on the plane. He pulled the cloth from his pocket and gave it a thorough rubbing, removing any trace of fingerprints, although he had only held it with his right hand, which didn't have any. When the driver swerved into the right lane to pass someone, Zeke rolled his window down and threw the pistol as hard as he could. It sailed through the air, going far beyond the edge of the bridge, to splash into the cold water below. One less piece of evidence to worry about. The taxi driver was still driving like a bat out of hell, so it didn't take them long at all to arrive at the airport. A forest of signs, most in Korean and English, hung above the road and on each side, guiding them to the right area. Zeke leaned forward and pointed to a small road, and the driver sped down it. He finally slammed on his brakes, locking up all four tires and nearly sending Zeke through the windshield. When the car came to a stop, the driver sat there, white-knuckled grip on the steering wheel, breathing heavily. Zeke held Jeremy's holophone up and shook it, and after a moment the driver nodded and raised his payment terminal. Zeke considered for a moment what would be a good payment for having him race across the city and to the airport like this, then doubled it again. The driver's eyes widened when he saw how much Zeke had paid him. He spoke quickly, bowing his head several times. Zeke didn't know the language, but the thanks was clear. He leaned forward and patted the man on the shoulder, then pushed the door open and hurried out of the car. Time to go home, Zeke muttered to himself as he stared at the airport. He realized he was still wearing the coveralls, so he pulled them off as he approached the entrance to the building and tossed them in a trash can next to the door. Other than the clothes on his back, that damn pink t-shirt, all he had was a fake ID in his front pants pocket and a toothbrush and small tube of toothpaste in his back pocket, and the hat on his head that changed his face, and the stolen holophones. It would have to be enough. "Let me know when he boards the plane," a message said on Jeremy's phone. Zeke stared at it for a moment, then replied, "Will do." With his ticket already on Jeremy's holophone, he made his way straight to the security station. There, he squinted his eyes, coughed a few times, and gave them the same line about an infection as he had in Luckhaven, and they begrudgingly scanned his fake ID instead. Zeke strolled through the airport surprisingly at ease. Things were going well so far. He reminded himself that the richest man in the world was behind this assassination job, so of course it had been planned to perfection. Not a single hitch. Other than, of course, the men that had kidnapped his girlfriends. He walked through the terminal and stopped by an overpriced tourist shop. This pink shirt had served its purpose, and it was time to get something less atrocious. His options at this store weren't much better, ranging from more anime characters to some shit in Korean he couldn't read to the most touristy thing available, a shirt with Seoul, Korea in bold letters on the front. He finally went with a t-shirt with a cartoon character on front, simply because it was the only black t-shirt available. Zeke walked to the bathroom with his new t-shirt in hand. He stopped by a stall and pulled it on, then went through Eric's holophone again. Zeke found the plane tickets in his phone as well, noting that there were 2 of them. Of course there were 2 tickets. Eric wasn't on vacation either. He was just there to ensure Zeke landed. Zeke sent another message to Darius from Eric's phone. "At the terminal, waiting for the plane. Everything's going as planned." Only a few seconds later, he received a reply. "Glad you pulled your dick out of a hooker long enough to do your fucking job." Zeke quickly scrolled through previous messages, examining common words and phrases Eric used. The dude seemed to really love his hookers. "Yeah, what can I say? Good way to spend some time." That should do the trick. Zeke slipped the phone back into his pocket and adjusted the hat on his head. A small eatery stood about 50 meters from his gate, and he had some time, so he decided to stop for a meal. He hadn't eaten since last night, and the thought of some Korean food was really appealing. Of course, since Zeke was looking forward to trying something authentic, this little restaurant was about as touristy as they came. He wound up ordering perhaps the most stereotypically American thing possible, a burger and a beer. Oh well, it hit the spot. At least the burger had a bit of teriyaki flavor to it. He watched the crowd as he ate his food. His flight departed from the gate right next to the one he had arrived through. Security guards patrolled the terminal in twice the number as when he had arrived. The news came on several nearby screens, so Zeke grabbed his beer and approached the one that was in English. "Authorities have still not identified the body of a man that was found." The news story suddenly froze in place and grew pixelated. Anyone else would assume network issues, but Zeke knew it was Sydney earning her paycheck. Shit, he was gonna have to pay her quite a lot for this. She was really saving his ass. He pulled out Eric's holophone and sent her a quick message. "Thanks again." She replied with a heart. Zeke's plane began boarding and he hopped in line. He had the window seat this time. The kid in him was happy, since he'd get to see an aerial view of Luckhaven as they approached. The adult in him grumbled as he'd have to push past 2 people if he wanted to leave his seat to use the bathroom. He did his best to settle his mind and relax. It was going to be a tense flight. Not even Sydney could change that. And as soon as he landed and got out of the airport, all hell was going to break loose. Chapter 11. Sunlight glittered over ocean waves as Zeke's plane flew over the west coast. Sandy beaches quickly gave way to the sprawling mansions of those that could afford to live on the coast.
Mansions gradually became suburban houses, and houses became towering apartment buildings as they flew over Luckhaven. The plane finally touched down, and Zeke breathed a sigh of relief. Everything was going well, he reminded himself. Delilah and Amelie were fine, and he was going to save them. The three of them would take Sydney out to dinner in the next day or two, and everyone would have a great time. In a few weeks, he'd be watching three asses in bikinis on the beaches of Belize. Life would be good. But first, he had some people to kill. Zeke patiently stood on the center aisle, waiting on everyone in front of him to get their carry-on bags and get off the plane. They took forever. One man who had spent the better part of 5 minutes struggling to cram his oversized bag into the overhead compartment now yanked and heaved on his bag, which was, of course, stuck. He cursed and pulled until there was a loud pop. Then his bag finally came free. He looked at the overhead compartment, which now had a broken panel, and scoffed, then walked up the center aisle. What an asshole. As soon as Zeke exited the plane, he pulled out Eric's phone and sent Darius another message. Just landed. Want me to let him go or bring him to you? He felt he was taking a risk with that text, but he didn't know what else to type. He dialed Sydney's number. Hey, handsome, she said as she answered the phone. Glad to be back in the States? Glad to be closer to my girls, Zeke said. Can you come get me? I'm already waiting out front, she said with a smile. You're the best, Zeke replied. I'll be out as soon as I can make my way through this terminal. Okay, I'll see you in a few. I'm in a blue sedan. Zeke ended the call and picked up his pace until he was jogging through the airport. With the hat projecting a new face onto his, he wasn't worried about anyone recognizing him. The stupid anime character on his shirt probably helped as well. He preferred plain clothes, no logos or images. Having no baggage helped speed his path, although the grainy feeling in his mouth reminded him of the toothbrush in his back pocket. Zeke hurried to the nearest bathroom and spent a few minutes brushing his teeth and washing his face. He ran his fingers through his short black hair, ensuring it looked properly messy, then left the bathroom. He pulled out Eric's phone and sent a message to Sam. Just landed. All went well. Zeke jogged past the baggage claim area and pushed through the front doors. The Luckhaven airport was huge, so it took him some time to find the blue sedan parked next to the curb. There was no mistaking Sydney's blonde hair through the windshield. Zeke ran up to her car and pulled the door open, then hopped in the seat. He grabbed the seatbelt and fastened it, then turned to Sydney. Get the fuck out of my car, asshole, she growled. She held a pistol mere centimeters from Zeke's face. Whoa, Sydney, it's me, Zeke said, leaning away from the gun. Her finger was on the trigger, and the look on her face said she wouldn't hesitate to fire. She pulled the gun back slightly and glared at him. Who the fuck are you, and why do you know my name? Zeke suddenly burst out laughing. His hat. Of course she wouldn't recognize him. He slowly reached up and removed his hat, then set it on his lap. Sydney's angry expression faded, and she laughed along with Zeke. Color stained her cheeks. Sorry I almost killed you. You probably should have taken that off before getting in my car, though. Yeah, you got a good point there, Zeke said. Thanks for not shooting me. Can you take me to my place? Of course. She opened her center console and slid the pistol within a hidden compartment, then closed it and grabbed the wheel. Let's get your women back so they can be my women, too. She tossed her blonde hair over her shoulder and gave Zeke a smile. Her beauty was like a glass of water in a desert. Big blue eyes looked Zeke up and down, and her full lips begged to be kissed. Leggings hinted at her long, toned legs, and she wore a baggy shirt that hung off one shoulder. She hit the accelerator and her car sped away, weaving between others. Several cars honked at her, but she ignored them all. So, get me up to speed on the situation, Sydney said without taking her eyes from the road. Just then, Darius responded to Zeke's earlier message. Yeah, but in a few hours. Get some food first. We're just dealing with some other bullshit, then we can handle this. Zeke hefted Eric's holophone. Eric. He was supposed to accompany me on both flights. He's dead. He pulled out Jeremy's holophone and held it up in his other hand. Jeremy. He made sure I went through with the assassination. Also dead. Eric's holophone chimed and Zeke checked it. Sam had responded.
Good. Meet me at the mall. We'll eat something before we bring 'em in. I gotta meet a guy over there anyways, selling some passports. Looks like Sam wants to meet me at the mall. Let's hurry to my place so I can get a few things, then head over there. That okay?
I'm on it, Sydney said as she sped through traffic.
Don't you need my address?
Zeke asked, holding on to his seat.
Nope. Already looked it up earlier.
She briefly smiled at him.
I come prepared, Zeke.
Zeke was a fast driver at times, but the way Sydney drove made him wonder if he would be able to keep his food down.
Well, if this doesn't work out, Zeke said, clutching the oh shit handle on the car. Looks like you can always start a career racing cars.
Sydney laughed. I already do that on the side.
What, race?
Yeah, she said with a nod. I go autocrossing at least once a month and try to book track days at Blue Rock Raceway a few times per year.
In this?
Zeke slapped the dashboard. Uh-huh. I upgraded the springs, shocks, and sway bars. You may have noticed a lack of body roll. As if to punctuate that statement, she turned right at an intersection without slowing. Zeke felt like his guts were trying to exit the left side of his rib cage. She hit the accelerator again, and the car rocketed forward.
Hey, as long as we arrive there in one piece, do whatever, Zeke said, though he silently hoped she didn't wreck. A car wailed on its horn as she sped around it. Oh, hey, this alley up here is a shortcut.
Sydney slammed on the brakes, hard enough that Zeke thought he might snap the seatbelt and fly through the windshield, then tossed the car to the right. She raced down the alley, paying no mind that it was only centimeters wider than her car.
Come on, Zeke, you've got that Agus. You should be used to fast cars by now.
I'll take you in a straight line and definitely top end. Zeke began, then held on tight as she exited the alley and jerked the wheel, sliding onto the street.
I think you've established that you'll leave me in the corners.
She stomped on the brakes again, then pulled into the parking garage beneath Zeke's condominium at a much more reasonable pace. Zeke let his heart rate drop to something approaching normal as she wound through the levels, then pulled into an open spot.
All right, we're here,
she said, looking over at Zeke with a grin.
Zeke shook his head and laughed. I think you just set a record for the fastest trip across town.
He pushed open the door and hopped out. Sydney exited her side, then walked over to join Zeke. Together they made their way to the nearby elevator doors.
Do you need much?
Sydney asked as Zeke pushed the elevator call button.
Just the basics, Zeke said.
Her shirt was white, and her nipples were visible beneath. Amelie often dressed in a similar manner, and it was just as difficult not to stare. He looked her carefully in the eye.
Hey, Sydney, thanks. I couldn't have done this without you.
Of course, she replied as she reached out and grabbed his hand.
It's the least I could do.
She let out a deep sigh and looked to the elevator door as it opened.
Amelie was the love of my life, and we ended things because we never saw each other. A healthy relationship can't exist when you don't spend any time together.
Zeke entered the elevator.
Well, now that things are different, hopefully you'll get that chance.
He avoided mentioning that he wanted her as well. He didn't want to be too forward, not yet. He was still testing the waters, so to speak. Sydney looked at him and smiled again, then reached out and grabbed his hand again.
Thanks, Zeke. For being okay with all this, I mean. I wanted to see Amelie again, but I don't want to be a homewrecker.
Zeke smiled.
That's certainly appreciated. I love Amelie and Delilah quite a bit, and I don't want anything that's going to stress them out or cause problems.
Sydney took a deep breath.
Agreed. I want everything to flow naturally. So, are we trying it then?
Zeke opened his mouth to reply, but the elevator suddenly stopped. The doors opened, and Sydney walked out. Zeke's eyes drank her in. Her shirt fell just short of her waist, so he got a clear view of her deliciously round backside in those leggings. She looked over her shoulder at him and smiled. She knew what she was doing. Zeke hurried after her.
Feels like an odd way to start a relationship,
Zeke said as he reached for his front door. He pushed it open and let her enter first.
Just Mutually agreeing in an elevator. Shouldn't I take you out for dinner or something?
He let the door close behind him. Sydney turned and faced him, biting her lower lip. Would this be better? She grabbed the bottom hem of her shirt and pulled it over her head, then tossed it to the floor. Her breasts were full and round, though not nearly as large as Delilah's, and each topped with a pink nipple. She was a tall woman and slender. Lithe was probably a better word. Her stomach was flat and her waist small. She could have been a model with a body like that. She stepped up to Zeke and grabbed the front of his shirt, pulling him toward her. Their lips met in an explosion of fiery passion. She was a beautiful woman, and Zeke naturally wanted her, but he could feel her lust in every kiss. She went to pull his shirt off, but he stopped her, so she went after his pants instead. Sydney undid his belt buckle, then whipped the belt to the side in a single motion and let it fall to the floor. Within a matter of seconds, she had his pants around his ankles and his cock in her mouth. Zeke had been half erect from the moment Sydney took her shirt off. The way she gripped the base of his cock and sucked from hilt to tip sent his blood rushing to his crotch, and he was rock hard in seconds. Her gag reflex was non-existent, which she proved repeatedly. Zeke reached over and grabbed onto the back of the couch with his right hand, as she was making him feel a bit weak in the knees. She kept at it for a few more minutes, then noticed Zeke gripping the couch. Now there's an idea, she said, giving his dick a squeeze. Huh? He replied. Thinking was difficult at that moment. She stood up and pushed her leggings down, then kicked them off. Giving Zeke a wink, she grabbed onto the back of the couch and bent over, spreading her feet. She looked at him over her shoulder. Don't make me beg, Zeke. Zeke kicked off his shoes and pants, then moved behind her. He spat on his fingertips and reached between her thighs, rubbing the saliva on her lips, and found her already warm and soaking wet. He took a step forward, lining the head of his cock up with her, and rubbed it around, covering it with her juices. The moment he started pushing in, she pushed her hips back, eager to have him inside her. Zeke worked himself in, then grabbed onto Sydney's slender hips and pulled her against him. Being inside her felt like stepping into a hot tub after a long, hard day. It was everything he needed. Gripping her hips, he began thrusting into her, slowly at first. Her right hand moved between her legs, and she began rubbing her clitoris vigorously. Reading her mood, Zeke slapped his palm down on her pale ass cheek and picked up the pace, giving her long, deep strokes that sent waves rippling across her backside. Sydney was completely uninhibited and moaned Zeke's name loudly as he slammed his hips against her backside. She called out for him to fuck her hard, faster, as she rubbed her clitoris. All of Zeke's pent-up stress and frustration seemed to melt away, and he focused on the beautiful woman before him. He was like a machine, thrusting into her and using her hips as a handle to pull her back on him. He rammed himself into her hard, then harder, filling the room with the sounds of skin slapping skin. Sydney bit her lip, stifling her moan, and her legs began to tremble. Her fingers didn't stop, and soon she was moaning full-throated as she bucked against him. Zeke felt himself pushed over the edge only moments later and roared his pleasure to the walls as he filled her with his seed. She pushed her ass against him, taking his full length and gyrating against his hips. Zeke practically collapsed over her, kissing her back while catching his breath. She began to move, and he pulled himself out of her and straightened up. Sydney turned around and immediately threw her arms around Zeke's neck and pulled him into a deep, passionate kiss. Zeke held her sweaty body against his, and she broke their kiss and laid her head on his shoulder. So what do you think? Is that a better way to start a relationship than just agreeing in an elevator? Zeke held her tightly. She smelled just as beautiful as she looked. No wonder Amelie liked her so much. I'll let you know once I can think again. They stood there for a moment, holding each other tightly. Sydney finally released him and looked into Zeke's eyes. I think everyone's going to be okay, Zeke. Besides, she added as she bent down and grabbed her clothes. Saving Amelie and Delilah's lives together is a pretty awesome way to start a relationship, don't you think? Zeke chuckled. She had a point. He grabbed his clothes and stepped into them, then went to his desk. The slimline pistol Amelie had talked him into wearing was gone. Darius probably had it. Zeke reached beneath his desk and pressed a small button. A hidden panel opened in his wall, revealing his prized handgun, the Carmenta Group 60 SKM, along with 3 mags of ammunition. Zeke pulled open a drawer in his desk and dug out his shoulder holster, then shrugged into it. His pistol went in one side, with the spare mags on the other. "Wow," said Sydney as she stepped closer. "What do you plan on doing with that thing? Hunting elephants?" Zeke grabbed his knife, the camp chopper, from the desk and fastened it below the spare magazines. "Life is too short for small-caliber weapons," he told her. "You look mildly ridiculous," Sydney said, leaning her head to one side. Zeke ran his fingers through his hair. "Yeah, I know. Amelie had convinced me to wear something smaller, something easily concealable. I'm not as concerned about that right now." His jacket was draped over the back of his chair, so he grabbed it and pulled it on. After a bit of thought, he rummaged through his desk and found a small vial of pills. He poured one into his hand, then slipped it into his pocket. That might come in handy later. Zeke pulled out Eric's holophone and sent Sam a message. "Be there in a few. Where am I meeting you?" "I'm ready when you are," he told Sydney. "Hey, you need a gun or anything?" "I have one in my car, Mr. Forgetful." She looked down at herself. Besides, where would I put it? She had a point. "I was going to drive, but I think you've shown you're faster." He checked his pistol and knife one more time. "Let's go get Amelie and Delilah back." Chapter 12. Sydney was a bit less reckless this time as they drove to the mall. While she still raced around like a bat out of hell, it was considerably less terrifying than before. Even still, they arrived at the mall in no time. Storm clouds moved in as she pulled into the parking lot, promising nasty weather soon. The mall always felt a little odd to Zeke. The big indoor shopping centers had gone out of style many decades ago, nearly a century ago, really, but then experienced an odd resurgence in more recent times. People wanted to try on clothes when they bought them, so they came to the mall instead of ordering online. Plus, the younger generation loved the retro aspect of it all. The mall was even decorated in neon colors, a tacky representation of the end of the last century. Zeke checked Eric's holophone as Sydney pulled into a parking spot. Sam had replied, saying to meet him at Dos Potrillos, a Mexican food joint on the second floor. Zeke had been there before. Their chicken quesadilla was excellent, especially for being lab-grown meat. "So what's the plan?" Sydney asked as they walked toward the mall. Fat drops of rain began to fall right as they reached the entrance. It was a huge building, 3 stories filled with stores of every kind. The center of the mall contained tall trees and bushes, a tiny forest in the concrete desert. The roof was paneled with thick glass panes to let in light. There was a big sale this week, with huge banners and ribbons as thick as Zeke's leg, stretching across the entire interior advertising just that. People of every sort moved around, shopping for clothes, electronics, food, or whatever else. They were mostly young and tacky. It was a popular fad among teenagers to dress like the previous century when coming to the mall. They looked like idiots to Zeke, although he wasn't exactly the embodiment of haute couture, with his jacket on in the summertime. "Our plan is pretty simple," Zeke said as he put the hat on that changed his face. "If he sees me without Eric, he'll realize something is up and tell Darius. He's in a restaurant right now, more of a bar, really, selling passports to some guy. I need you to go in there and lure him out." "And how do you expect me to do that?" Sydney asked with a raised eyebrow. "Just go flirt with him a bit. Tell him whatever you want, whatever it takes. Just get him out of the restaurant and I'll handle the rest." "Why don't you just go in there and get him?" Sydney asked. Zeke chuckled. "Because the bartender there keeps a shotgun below the bar. Sam is probably carrying as well, and I wouldn't be surprised if his buyer is packing too. I don't want people shooting in a place filled with innocents. Plus, I don't want to get shot. That shit hurts." "So you want me to get him out of the restaurant, then you'll disarm him and take over?"
Exactly, Zeke said. They used an escalator to take them to the second floor, then continued around the walkway toward the food court. On the edge of the food court was Dos Potrillos. They stopped for a moment and watched the entrance. The news played quietly on a screen above them, and something caught Zeke's attention. The body of Senator Jim Talmonth was pulled from the wreckage. Initial reports state that he was killed instantly in the crash. Zeke grunted. Sydney looked at him, and Zeke pointed at the screen. Senator Talmonth had announced more than a month ago that Xander Kinnear had offered him a substantial sum of money in an attempt to convince him to vote for an upcoming bill. Furthermore, Senator Talmonth stated that he would be sponsoring a new bill targeting this exact sort of behavior. His wife and son were also in the car. None survived. Cordell, Zeke muttered. Who? Sydney asked. Zeke shook his head. Xander's main henchman. When Xander needs someone killed, he sends Cordell. He has some other guys that can do that sort of stuff for him, but for the truly important stuff, he sends Cordell. Should I ask how you know this? Zeke raised his right hand and tapped it. He's the reason I have this. Well, him and a guy named Tobias. I killed Tobias. If fortune smiles on me, I'll get my chance with Cordell. And hopefully you fare better than last time, Sydney said. Zeke looked at her and she shrugged. What? You just became my boyfriend like 30 minutes ago. I'd rather not lose you so quickly. Zeke laughed. Thunder roared outside, and Zeke looked up to the glass roof. It was really pouring outside. So what's this guy look like? Sydney asked. Sam. Sam? He's a piggy little man, short and round, and he sneers at everyone and everything. He's got long black hair, might have it in a ponytail. Greasy skin, I think a goatee or a wispy beard. I can't quite remember. Sydney brushed her hands over her body and took a deep breath. All right, let's do this. She walked toward the restaurant, swaying her hips side to side, and disappeared inside. Zeke slowly moved closer to the restaurant and leaned on the railing for a moment as if looking around. He turned to face the restaurant and pulled out Eric's holophone, pretending to look through it. Instead, he zoomed in with his right eye and scanned the restaurant. He spotted Sam almost immediately, seated at a table across from a fat man wearing a round hat and a white shirt. They spoke over beers, and Sam reached beneath the table and passed a thick envelope to the fat man. Sam looked around briefly while the fat man examined the contents of the envelope and stroked his mustache. He finally moved where Zeke could see. The envelope contained passports, forged ones, probably. The fat man finally nodded, then shoved the passports back into the envelope and tucked it inside his blazer. He said something and grinned, then slid a briefcase beneath the table toward Sam. Ugh, Zeke mumbled. These guys were about as subtle and covert as one of those old action movies from last century. Both men noticed when Sydney walked in, although to be fair, almost the entire bar looked at her. She flipped her hair over her shoulder and took a path to the bar that involved walking past Sam's table. Right in front of it, she stumbled on something non-existent and dropped her holophone. With a silent curse, she turned and bent over to pick it up, giving Sam quite the view. Sam's eyes went wide as he saw her curves laid out before him. Zeke couldn't blame him. Sydney was quite gorgeous. A mall cop strolled by, struggling to look important. He gave Zeke a suspicious glare, the same one he gave everyone else. Zeke ignored him and kept scrolling through Eric's phone. The man had some nasty photos in there. Good afternoon, sir. You doing okay? The mall cop stepped up to Zeke with his thumbs hitched behind his belt. Yeah, just waiting on a friend, Zeke said, briefly glancing at Sydney in the restaurant. He thought he felt something wet on his shoulder, but paid it no mind. Sydney was talking with Sam now and gesturing toward the door with a sly smile. Sam looked her up and down and rubbed his chin while nodding. Whatever he said, he was agreeing with her. Hey, be careful. The roof leaks sometimes when it rains this hard, the mall cop said, right as several drops of water fell onto Zeke again. The water struck him right on top of his ear, and he yanked off his hat and cursed. He wiped his wet ear on the sleeve of his jacket and looked up,
grumbling as another drop of water leaked from the roof and fell onto his shoulder. He took a step to the side to avoid any further droplets. Sam walked out of the restaurant right at that moment and locked eyes with Zeke. The look on Sam's face when he saw only Zeke standing there without Eric suggested he realized exactly what was going on. Everything seemed to move in slow motion. Sam fumbled through his pockets and pulled out his holophone with one hand and a small pistol with the other. Sydney slapped his hand, the one nearest to her holding the holophone, sending it sliding across the floor. He shoved Sydney out of his way and raised his pistol at Zeke. The mall cop had pulled out pepper spray the moment he saw that Sam was packing heat. He sprayed a line at the short man, only missing Sydney because she had stumbled backward after being pushed. It wasn't a direct hit, but some got on Sam's face, causing him to shout in rage. Sam turned and fired a round into the cop's stomach, sending him to the floor. He shot at Zeke, but Zeke had already dived to the side, and moving targets were damn hard to hit. Zeke crashed to the ground and rolled, drawing his heavy pistol in the process. People screamed and fled the restaurant. Zeke rushed to his feet, helping Sydney up in the process. "Fuck, that stuff is horrible," Zeke said, coughing. Just the residue from the pepper spray burned his lungs and eyes. Behind him, the cop rolled on the ground and screamed. There were too many people in front of him to consider safely shooting, so he shoved his pistol back in its holster and hurried after Sam. His pistol banged against his ribs with every step. Sydney caught up with him, following in his wake as he shoved his way through the crowd. In front of them, Sam fired 3 more rounds behind him without looking. One bullet struck an elderly man in the side of the head, sending him to the floor. People ducked after the gunshots, which made it easier for Zeke to chase after him, although Sam was still far ahead. Sam ran to the escalators and leapt between them, landing on the smooth metal surface and sliding down. He slid from the polished metal onto the floor in a heap, but quickly recovered and kept running toward the exit. Zeke followed him onto the metal panel between the escalators. It felt like going down a slide as a kid, except screaming people flanked him on both sides and a madman with a gun was waiting for him at the bottom. Sydney shouted several curses and hopped on behind Zeke. Zeke tried to keep his feet forward but started twisting to the side halfway down. When he hit the end of the metal panel, he slid onto the floor, rolling on his side. Sydney slid off and landed on her feet, stumbling a step but running with it. She reached down and pulled Zeke up, and they chased Sam out the door. "I'm following him. Get to your car and pick me up," Zeke said as he sprinted for the door. Sam fired another round without looking. That man was a danger to everyone in here. The automatic doors slid open and Sam ran through, scurrying through the rain toward the parking lot. Zeke pulled out his pistol and took careful aim, but Sam suddenly ducked down a row of cars. "Fuck!" Zeke shouted. As dense as the parking was here, there was no telling where he went. Zeke hurried to where he had seen him pass between cars and tried to follow the man. He didn't see or hear Sam. He rushed down several aisles, looking each way, cursing the rain that soaked him to the bone. A yellow sports car suddenly pulled out of a parking spot, speeding right for Zeke. He jumped to the side, narrowly avoiding being run over, and fired 3 rounds the moment he landed on the ground. One of them struck the back of Sam's car, but it only caused superficial damage. Sydney pulled up seconds later. Zeke ran around to the passenger side and yanked the door open, then hopped in. She hit the gas immediately, and Zeke struggled to fasten his seatbelt as she flung the car around corners. "It's that yellow car that was just ahead of you," Zeke said. "Don't worry, I see him," Sydney said, gripping the wheel tightly. "He's not getting away." Chapter 13. Sydney's car banged over a pothole, but she didn't slow down one bit. Sam's yellow sports car zipped ahead of them, weaving dangerously through traffic on the wet pavement. Sydney quickly followed. "Center console," Sydney said, not taking her eyes off the road. "I grabbed his phone after I slapped it out of his hand." Zeke grabbed the holophone and grinned. "Perfect. This'll come in handy once we catch up with him." "I'm assuming you're saying that because you have a plan," Sydney said, racing against traffic for a moment to pass a slow-driving grandmother in an antique station wagon. Ahead of them, Sam's car sideswiped another car before speeding away. "I always have a plan," Zeke replied. "Sometimes it just doesn't fully solidify until the last minute."
He pulled his pistol out, but knew he couldn't risk shooting it in such heavy traffic. Besides the risk of killing innocents, the cops would be on them in a heartbeat. Instead, he focused on scanning through Sam's recent messages. Sam's car was fast, perhaps faster than Sydney's, but his driving was erratic and reckless. At this rate, he was more likely to cause a wreck than get away from them. He cut people off, and sometimes took their side mirrors off, causing people to slam on their brakes and block lanes. It made following him quite difficult. Sydney whipped her car to the side to avoid a slowing truck. Zeke struggled to hold on. The seats held him in place well enough, but the constant side-to-side made it difficult. At the next intersection, Sam turned right, fishtailing around the corner. Sydney took the more stable route and zoomed into the next lane as quickly as possible, gaining several meters on him. "Where is he going?" Sydney asked. Zeke looked around, ensuring he understood exactly where they were driving. "Probably somewhere where he has backup. We need to catch up to him and prevent that from happening." "Doing my best," Sydney said, now right behind Sam. "Don't let him turn left here," Zeke said, pointing at an approaching intersection. Sydney floored it, moving up to Sam's left side. If he tried to turn, he would hit her car and spin out of control. He tried anyway, and once he realized his lightweight sports car couldn't simply push her heavier sedan out of the way, he turned back to the street and sped away. "He's going for the freeway," Zeke said, pointing at Sam. "His car is faster than mine, so there's a chance we'll lose him if he figures out how to drive that thing," Sydney said. Sam's car zoomed down a nearby on-ramp, slowly pulling away from Sydney's. While her car had better handling, on the freeway, Sam's sports car would be able to stretch its long legs. Sydney swerved around a stream of slow-driving cars and drove on the shoulder for a stretch, her accelerator to the floor. There was just enough traffic to keep Sam from outrunning them, but it looked like things cleared up ahead. They had to act quickly. "He sucks at driving, but that damn car is fast," Sydney said, her brows furrowed in concentration. "Germans are great at building fast cars," Zeke said, gripping his pistol. "Just put me behind him and try to hold things steady." Sydney moved around a semi and got in the far left lane, then floored it. Zeke held his pistol ready to move. Ahead of them, Sam's car slowly pulled away. Zeke rolled down his window and leaned out, raising his heavy pistol. Only the strength of his cybernetic arm could hold the huge guns somewhat steady in the 200-kilometer-per-hour winds that slammed into him. He closed his left eye and focused with his right, taking careful aim. "My eyes would be watering so badly if I tried that," Sydney said. "My right eye isn't real, Sydney," Zeke said offhandedly. He pulled the trigger, sending a bullet into one of Sam's rear tires. The car swerved to the side, but otherwise looked fine. "Looks like he's got airless tires, just like us," Sydney said. "The damage should cause a bit of extra drag, though." Sure enough, Sam's car stopped pulling away from them. Sydney kept her foot to the floor, and they slowly gained on the yellow car. Zeke aimed again, this time just inwards from the same rear tire he had already shot. He sent 4 bullets into the car, trying to cripple either the suspension or the electric motor. One of these bullets would surely do something. Sam's car suddenly lurched to the side as that rear tire locked up, sending him sliding at high speed. Sydney slowed, maintaining a safe distance. Zeke pulled back into the car, shoving his pistol in the holster for safekeeping. As Sam's car slid sideways, his window rolled down and he fired at them. Only 1 bullet came out, digging a trench in her roof. After that, Sam's pistol was empty. "I'll pay for whatever damage is done to your car," Zeke said. "Don't worry." As Sam's car slid to a halt, Sydney charged. Sam's door flew open, and the portly man stumbled out of his car, flinging his empty pistol at them. He scrambled to his feet and sprinted away, running off the freeway and into the sparse tree line. Sydney slammed on the brakes, angling her car toward Sam. Zeke grabbed Sam's holophone and shoved it in his pocket, then pushed the door open and ran after him after Sydney's car came to a stop. Zeke ignored his heavy pistol banging against his ribs and pumped his legs as hard as he could, chasing after the chubby man. Sam wasn't the fastest runner, so it didn't take Zeke long to be right on his tail. Sam gasped for breath and yelped as he glanced over his shoulder, seeing Zeke behind him. He juked to the side, but Zeke was faster.
Zeke reached out, nearly grabbing Sam by his greasy ponytail, but missed. Sam leaped to the right and ducked behind a tree, pulling a branch down behind him. Zeke had to dodge the branch as it rebounded and struck at him. He hurried after Sam, catching up in no time. Sam was clearly going to keep weaving through trees, so Zeke reached out with both hands and jumped. He caught onto Sam's legs and pulled him to the ground. Sam's face slammed into the dirt, and he kicked wildly at Zeke, striking him in the head. Zeke rolled to the side and blinked away, the stars in his vision. Sam had already scrambled to his feet and was hurrying away again, although he was running more slowly this time. Zeke chased after him again, dodging the sparse trees. He shoved Sam forward, causing the fleeing man to stumble and fall face first onto the ground a second time. Zeke knelt and planted his knee in the middle of Sam's back, pinning him to the ground. Sam flailed and fought wildly until Zeke grabbed his pistol and struck Sam across the back of the head with it. Sam hollered in pain and clutched at his split scalp as it oozed dark beads of blood. Zeke switched his pistol to his left hand and stood over the man, then reached down and pulled him to his feet with his cybernetic arm. He slammed Sam's back against a nearby tree and pressed the gun against his face. "Hey, man, don't shoot. I'm just doing my job, man. I can get you the people in charge if you—" Zeke used his grip on Sam's collar to yank the man forward. Zeke dropped his head and slammed it into Sam's nose, flattening it to one side. Sam screamed and clutched at his face, and Zeke slammed his back against the tree again. "Shut the fuck up, Sam," Zeke told him. "Here's what's going to happen. I'm going to give you your holophone, and you're going to call whoever it is you report to and tell them that everything is going great." Sam leaned forward and glared at Zeke with bloodshot eyes. "Fuck you," he spat. Zeke released Sam's collar and shrugged. He swapped his pistol back into his right hand and raised it high over his head, ready to hit Sam again. Whoa, okay, hold on," Sam said, raising both hands as if they would stop the heavy pistol from breaking something. "All right, just give me the damn phone." "Fuck, you're an asshole, man," he muttered. "Says the guy that helped kidnap my girlfriends," Zeke said flatly, pulling out the holophone. "No hologram, audio only." Sam glared at him for a moment, then nodded. "Cordell did the kidnapping. Him and Darius and a guy named Jason drove for them. See, I can be helpful." He gave a bloodied smile that was filled with murderous desire. "So who do you report to? Darius?" Zeke asked. Sam looked at him for a moment, then nodded. "Yeah." Zeke tapped the screen, dialing Darius's number, and held the phone in front of Sam. "What do you want?" Darius answered. Sam opened his mouth, glaring at Zeke. He closed it as Zeke raised his pistol and leveled it at his face, then nodded. "Just letting you know that all's good. I just met up with Eric and that Zeke asshole at the mall and got some food. You ready for us to come to you yet?" "Yeah, go ahead and bring 'em. Can't believe he actually pulled off the assassination." Darius laughed. "Shame I don't get to spend any time with these bitches. Whatever. See you soon." With that, he hung up. Zeke stuffed the phone back into his pocket. Sam suddenly kicked forward, trying to nail Zeke right between the legs. Zeke twisted to the side, taking Sam's boot on his thigh, then rammed his fist into Sam's stomach. Sam doubled over in pain, wheezing and gasping for air. Zeke grabbed him and slammed him back against the tree. "Hey, in case you missed my message the first time, fuck you, Zeke," Sam growled. Zeke punched him in the stomach again, sending him to the ground, struggling to breathe. "Congratulations, Sam," Zeke said as he pulled out Sam's holophone. "You just helped me get my girlfriends back." "The fuck I did," Sam said between gasps for breath. "You don't even know where they are. You'll need me for that." "I already know. I went through your phone on the drive here. It's in your messages from Darius," Zeke said. He raised his pistol and took aim at Sam. No, wait," Sam cried out. "Hold on, Zeke, hold on. Okay, just calm down, man." "I feel quite calm," Zeke replied. "Looks like it's you that's panicking." "That's because you got a gun in my face, dick," Sam replied. Zeke gave him a flat look, then shrugged. He took a step back and took aim at Sam's head. "No, wait! Killing me is a mistake, Zeke, a big mistake. I'm not like those other guys. I'm into big stuff, real big stuff. I got connections, man. I can set you up with jobs that'll have you swimming in money for the rest of your life." Zeke stared at him coldly and lowered his pistol while waiting for Sam to finally run out of words. Sam's wild eyes rolled as he struggled to think of any angle he could reach Zeke with. "Hey, man, you remember what you said to me at the airport? You said you were gonna kill me last. There's like 3 more guys involved in this still. You can't kill me yet, Zeke. I can help you get to them." "Yeah, about that," Zeke said, raising his pistol. "I guess I lied." He pulled the trigger, blowing the back half of Sam's head off. He stood there for a moment, watching Sam's body twitch as his brains oozed out of his destroyed skull. Zeke took no pleasure in killing these scumbags. He just did what needed to be done. Zeke shoved his pistol back in its holster as he turned and walked away. Cops would be showing up soon, and he needed to be as far away as possible. He jogged through the thin trees and went to Sydney's car. Every one of these bastards that he killed got him one step closer to getting Amelie and Delilah back. He pulled the car door open and slipped inside. Sydney looked around for a moment, noting that only Zeke had returned. "What happened to Sam?" Zeke looked over at Sam's car, still lying on its side. "He lost his head." Sydney looked at him for a moment, then grinned and hit the gas. They sped down the freeway, hurrying from the scene of the accident. "Where to?" she asked. "Downtown," Zeke replied, staring at the window. He told himself the girls were still okay, that no one had harmed them. "To the Carmenta Group headquarters." Chapter 14. Sydney weaved through cars and ran every red light to get them downtown as quickly as possible, but the sheer size and population of Luckhaven made the trip difficult. Zeke's stomach boiled and his nerves felt ragged and shot. He wanted to form a plan in his mind, but the truth was that he was walking in blind. "Do you need to get anything on the way there?" Sydney asked. "A bazooka," Zeke said. He chuckled, but there was no mirth in it. "Maybe a guillotine." Sydney looked over at him for a moment, then back to the road. "They're okay, Zeke. We're going to swoop in there and save them, and everything is going to be okay. Then you can finally take me on that date you promised." "Is that so?" Zeke asked, raising an eyebrow. "Hope you don't mind guys with scars." Now it was Sydney's turn to laugh. She cut the car to the right, speeding into a parking garage. "Ready?" she asked as she pulled into a parking space. "I'm ready," Zeke said, checking his pistol. He pulled out Eric's holophone and sent Darius a quick message. "We're at the tower. Where did you want me to go again?" Hopefully that wasn't too obvious. They both stepped out of the car. Sydney somehow managed to hide a small pistol beneath her revealing clothes, and Zeke was armed to the teeth, as usual. He was ready for anything except failure. Eric's phone chimed. "To the basement, dumbass. Let me know when you're here." Sydney reached out and grabbed Zeke's hand as they walked down the concrete ramp that exited the parking garage. She gave it a squeeze. "Jesus, Zeke, you're tense. I know we're in a shit situation right now, but take a deep breath." "Easier said than done, doll," Zeke said. He kept his head on a swivel in case Darius had any surprises planned. "So has your plan solidified yet?" Sydney asked. Zeke grunted in reply. "Unfortunately, we're going in blind, Sid. All we know is that they're in the basement with Amelie and Dell. My only thought is that when I let him know we're here, he'll send someone looking for me and Eric. We'll grab that guy and he'll lead us to wherever they're at." Sydney pursed her lips. "It's not a very good plan, but it's all we've got." She stopped and looked up as they reached the Carmenta Group tower. "Didn't expect to find myself here when I answered that call from you the other day." "Life has a tendency to be rather chaotic when I'm around," Zeke replied. "And it's about to get a lot worse. Perhaps I should apologize."
"We'll worry about apologies when this is all over," she said, flashing him a smile. The glass doors slid open, and Zeke and Sydney strolled into the massive lobby. A circular fountain took up space in front of Zeke, with sculptures of fantastic beasts all climbing toward a bronze jug that poured out a clear stream of water. Zeke's boots reverberated on the marble floor tiles as he crossed the expansive room with Sydney at his side. Together they strode directly toward the elevators, of which there were 8. He pressed the call button, then pulled out Eric's holophone and sent Darius a final message. "Heading down. B3, right?" It only took Darius a few seconds to reply. "Yes, you fucking idiot." Zeke hit the button for basement level 3, took a step back, and waited. He looked over at Sydney. "You ready?" "I believe so. I'm more used to being behind a keyboard, remember?" she replied as she pulled her pistol out and racked the slide. "Just stay close and you'll be fine," Zeke said. "Be careful going around corners. Listen and look for anything that seems out of place." Giving her a decade's worth of advice in 30 seconds just wasn't going to work. The elevator chimed as it reached basement level 3, and the doors slowly opened to reveal a stark white wall and concrete floors. Zeke stepped out into the hallway. Sydney followed behind with her pistol held ready. "Just don't shoot me," Zeke said as he slowly made his way down the hall. He thumbed the safety off and held his pistol ready. There were no sounds other than the faint hum of distant machinery and the occasional whine of the elevators. Zeke kept his breathing steady and quiet as he stepped toward a corner ahead. If he saw Darius around that corner, he would be hard-pressed not to blow the man's head off right away. As he approached the corner, he pointed to his left and looked at Sydney. She nodded and focused in that direction while Zeke went right. He pulled his pistol close to his chest so he wasn't flagging as he crept around the corner. As soon as he stepped in the hallway, his pistol came out and his finger went to the trigger. Darius stood there with an amused smile on his face. "Shit," Sydney said from behind him. Zeke turned and saw 2 men behind them entering the hallway from side doors. They each held shotguns leveled at Sydney. He turned back to Darius and took careful aim at the man's head. "Give me one reason why I shouldn't blow your fucking head off right now," Zeke grated. "I'll give you 2 reasons, and each one is a shotgun," Darius said. He clapped his hands while slowly walking toward Zeke. "I must congratulate you, Zeke. You've caused quite a bit of trouble, and to be honest, we didn't even know until a few minutes ago. The building is full of security cameras, as you could imagine," he explained as if talking to a child. He seemed completely unbothered by the pistol pointed at him. Zeke clenched his jaw in anger. With everything going on, he had never even bothered to think about all the cameras that would be in the Carmenter Group building. They probably watched him and Sydney walk in and immediately knew what had happened. It was a sloppy mistake. "I guess I must first thank you for killing Sang-hoon Park," Darius continued. "I'm glad you at least finished the job. Tell me, how did you kill him?" "Hit on the roof of the next building over and shot him in the head," Zeke said. "Look, just give me Amelie and Delilah and we'll be on our way. You won't have to worry about seeing me ever again." "And Eric?" Darius asked as if Zeke hadn't spoken. Zeke rolled his eyes. "Are you going to ask me about each person I killed? I broke his fucking neck on the airplane. Also, I shot Sam in the face. Are you just going to keep asking me dumb shit, or can we finish our business here?" Darius's grin deepened. "Oh, Zeke, I'm afraid our business is just getting started." A door next to Zeke opened without warning, and a giant of a man stepped out. His massive hand clamped down on Zeke's gun, overpowering his cybernetic arm and tearing the gun from his grasp like taking a toy from a child. Zeke glared pure murder at the man, but felt a tendril of fear take root in his gut. It was Cordell. "Good to see you, Zeke," Cordell said with a grin as he tossed Zeke's pistol to the floor. "I can't wait to finish what I started more than a year ago." His ham-sized fist slammed into Zeke's head, knocking him senseless. Before Zeke could recover, Cordell's massive arms were around his neck, cutting off blood flow to his brain. Zeke struck with his elbows and kicked behind him, but it was like punching a bag filled with gravel. Cordell ignored every hit, and Zeke's vision finally faded into blackness. Chapter 15. Stinging pain on Zeke's cheek pulled him from the depths of unconsciousness. His jaw ached from the blow as well as from Cordell hitting him earlier. "Did you just fucking slap me?" Zeke asked, trying to work the stiffness from his jaw. He pushed himself up so that he was sitting on the cold concrete floor. Handcuffs bound his wrists, and manacles kept his ankles together. Darius stood in front of him with that insufferable grin on his bearded face and crossed his arms. He shrugged. "Had to wake you somehow. Anyways, good morning, sunshine. Welcome to the rest of your life. Although, there won't be much of it." The moment Darius opened his mouth, Zeke was already tired of dealing with him. Unfortunately, he went on. "You see, Zeke, I'm supposed to pay you some money. Quite a lot of money, in fact. But after giving it some thought, I've decided that this money would be more comfortable in my bank account." "Money? That's what this is about? You're just being fucking greedy?" Zeke asked, incredulous. Darius scoffed. "Of course not. You've been a thorn in Mr. Kinnear's side for quite some time now, and I imagine he would appreciate you being gone. My plan was to have Jeremy capture you and have you arrested after you shot Sangoon Park, but you decided to teach him how to fly. When Eric told me you were boarding the plane back to the States, I realized I had to rethink my plan." He tapped his lips with a finger. "But then again, that wasn't Eric that told me that. It was you, you naughty little criminal, you." Zeke would have given almost anything for the man to shut the hell up, but Darius wasn't quite done yet. "So here we are," Darius said, spreading his hands. "I'm taking your money and splitting it up amongst us." He looked around the room. Cordell leaned against a wall, idly examining his fingernails, and another man in a sweaty tank top stood near a set of steel tables. "I guess lucky for us. You killed 3 people. That means more money for each of us. And of course, we'll take turns with your princesses once Cordell here is done with you. I know Jason here is plenty excited about that last part." Behind him, Cordell's face split into a grin. The hairy man named Jason smiled as he picked up a length of rope. "You guys want to go ahead and bring him in?" Darius asked, turning to Jason and Cordell. "Yeah, boss," Jason said, then exited through a side door. Cordell followed him. "We're really in for a treat tonight, my boy. A real treat indeed," Darius said, watching them leave. He turned back to Zeke. "I don't think you're going to enjoy it as much, but that's not really so important. Xander will definitely be happy. He only put up with your shit this long because you made him money. Hell, he'll probably give me a raise." Zeke pulled against his handcuffs. They were on tight, with no wiggle room. He reminded himself that he had managed to survive this far. He would find a way out of this, as he always did. "Special delivery," Jason said as he pulled the door open and entered. A bound and gagged Delilah was thrown over his shoulder. When she squirmed and struggled, he slapped her bottom hard, bringing a yelp from her. Cordell entered behind Jason with Amelie and Sydney over his massive shoulders. He gave Zeke a smile, daring him to react. Rage filled Zeke, and he struggled to get to his feet. He couldn't do much of anything, handcuffed and shackled, but he would fight as long as he had blood pumping in his veins. "Easy there," Darius said, placing his boot on Zeke's chest and shoving him back. "We'll uncuff you soon, don't worry. They just need to get comfortable first." Zeke watched as Jason and Cordell took his girlfriends over to the steel tables. With their wrists and ankles bound, the girls couldn't do much in terms of fighting back either. A vivid bruise marred the side of Amelie's face, which turned Zeke's thoughts ever darker.
Amelie, Delilah, and Sydney were each laid on their backs on the steel tables, and their legs and arms were strapped tightly to them. Those tables were the same as the ones Zeke had been tortured on so long ago. In fact, looking around, he realized this was the very room he had been tortured in. It made his blood run cold. "I'm gonna kill you in the most painful way imaginable," Zeke growled at Darius. Darius looked back and smiled. "Sure you are." Cordell lumbered up next to Darius and looked down at Zeke. "I hope you're as excited as I am," he rumbled as he cracked his knuckles against his palm. "I finally get to finish what I started." "Yeah, you keep fucking saying that," Zeke muttered as he tried to keep an eye on everything and everyone. Things were looking bad for sure, but someone would mess up. It always happened. Someone forgot something, overstepped, slipped. Accidents happened, and when one occurred, Zeke would strike, hard and fast. All three of the women were gagged, reducing their cries to muffled whimpers. Jason pushed on the edge of Delilah's table, and it pivoted so that she was at a 45-degree angle instead of horizontal. He leered at her for a moment, licking his lips, then crossed his hairy arms and turned to Darius. "I guess we're ready here, boss." "Lovely, just lovely," Darius replied, clapping his hands and rubbing them together. He looked down at Zeke and tapped his lips in thought for a moment. "Are you ready?" "Guess I don't have much choice," Zeke said. Darius grunted as he knelt in front of Zeke, then pulled a set of keys from his pocket. "Don't even think of trying anything smart," he said as he unlocked Zeke's shackles and tossed them to the side. He put a hand on his thigh and pushed himself up to his feet with a wince, then worked his right leg a few times. "Bad knee?" Zeke tucked that bit of knowledge away for later. Darius held a hand out, as if offering to help Zeke to his feet. Zeke ignored him and pushed himself up. "All right, Nancy boy," Darius said, jerking his thumb toward the steel door set midway along the sidewall. "Time to meet your maker." "Hands," he said, and Zeke held his hands out in front of him. Darius unlocked Zeke's handcuffs. Without hesitation, Zeke dipped his hand into his pocket and felt around for the small pill he had slipped in there earlier at his condo. He withdrew it and put it in his mouth, chewed and swallowed. Darius noticed this and smirked. "Cordell's just gonna soften you up a little. Once he's done, you're gonna sit there and watch us take turns with your girlfriends." He abruptly chuckled. "3 of them, 3 of us. Works out nicely, eh?" Jason reached out and caressed Delilah's cheek with his finger. "I call dibs on this one." She jerked her head away from him and glared, her eyes glimmering with rage. Her gag prevented her from saying anything, but Zeke was sure she had a mouthful of curses ready. Amelie and Sydney whimpered, and fearful tears streamed from their eyes. As one, all 3 women turned their heads to watch Zeke. He gave them all a wink and a crooked grin, then turned back to the door. Zeke went there with his back straight and his head high. All he had to do was figure out how to kill Cordell, and the rest would be simple. The giant man loomed behind him, grinning maniacally as Zeke opened the door. The next room was similar, in that it had concrete walls and a concrete floor. Industrial shelves filled with repair materials lined one wall, ceiling tiles, small squares of drywall and the like. Buckets of paint filled the bottom shelves. Zeke scanned for anything that could be used as a weapon, like a screwdriver or hammer, but saw nothing. His heart started pounding in his chest. The pill he had taken was something known as Raptor on the streets. It was a dangerous drug with a lot of side effects, but it ramped up pain tolerance, aggression, and several other things to dangerously high levels. It had been developed in secret by a doctor working for a kickboxing coach, and was immediately banned when officials discovered it. As long as Zeke's heart didn't explode, he would be ready for whatever Cordell threw at him. Cordell swaggered into the room and pulled the door shut behind him. He slowly circled the room with that same maniacal grin on his face, flexing his hands. Zeke kept his distance and raised both fists. The rush from the dose of Raptor was just starting to kick in. He hoped it would be enough. Cordell pulled off his vest and tossed it to the concrete floor, revealing more of his impossibly muscled body. He flexed his arms a few more times, then punched at the air in front of him to warm up before moving closer to Zeke. "I gotta tell you, I've been waiting for this for a long time," Cordell said as he closed in on Zeke. "It never sat well with me that Xander wouldn't let me kill you." Zeke felt a glimmer of hope at Cordell being in such a talkative mood. The more attention he gave to flapping his gums, the less he had to spend on the fight itself. "Yeah, and I helped bring in a lot of money for your boss," Zeke said. Cordell's reach was much longer than his. This was going to be tricky. "If this affects his business, he won't be too happy with you. You know how Xander values his cash." Cordell dropped his fists for a moment and scoffed. "I already called him and told him when you were knocked out. He told me to have fun." Zeke lunged in and jabbed Cordell in the stomach with his left fist, then followed it up with all the strength he could put into his cybernetic right hand. Cordell grunted. Nothing more. Zeke had to duck beneath a fist that would have broken his neck. The Raptor was really taking hold now. It was a short-lived drug, but intense. Zeke almost felt as if time slowed around him. Cordell moved forward and swung a massive fist again. Zeke dodged it, as if he had all the time in the world, and followed up with a punch of his own. Cordell paid it no mind. "You can't hurt me, Zeke," Cordell said. "You should have figured that out by now." He dropped his fists and straightened up, then slapped himself on the stomach. "Go ahead and see if you—" Zeke cut him off and drove his metal fist into Cordell's stomach as hard as he could, right in the solar plexus. Cordell blew out a chestful of air, then straightened back up. "Ah, that was a good one," Cordell exclaimed with a laugh. "I almost felt it. Come on, Zeke. You can do better than that." He brought his fists up again and slowly approached. Well, that wasn't good. Zeke's only hope was to wear the giant down over time and hopefully before the other guys got bored and decided to lay their grubby paws on his girlfriends, and before his drugs wore off. Zeke began a methodical process of striking when he could, then ducking out of the way. Cordell was fast, but with the help of the Raptor, Zeke moved too quickly for the big man to hit him. He landed blow after blow on Cordell's stomach as the big man slowly drove him backward in a circle. Reality struck when Zeke realized all of his punches were having little to no effect on the enormous man. Plus, all it would take was one solid blow, and Cordell would lay Zeke out. Then the pain would begin. He needed to fight dirty, and as dirty as he could. "I'm gonna kill you like I did your old buddy Flynn," Zeke said, juking to the side to dodge a lethal punch. Flynn had been one of Cordell's co-workers, a new guy in training. Equally large, he lacked Cordell's skill and calm demeanor. Zeke had wrecked his knee, then stomped on his throat, killing him. Zeke bounced backward a few steps, giving himself some space. With a quick glance, he saw the shelves behind him filled with drywall patch panels and spare ceiling tiles. A broom leaned against the shelf. A thought suddenly came to Zeke, and he decided to run with it. He felt like it was his only hope at this point. He brought his fists back up and dashed in, putting all his weight into a punch right at Cordell's crotch. The big man's eyes bulged and he gasped in pain. Zeke immediately turned and grabbed the broom, then swung it two-handed as hard as he could at Cordell's head. Cordell brought an arm up and caught the broom as if it were a pillow. He snatched it from Zeke's grasp, then snapped it over his thigh. With an angry laugh, he threw the splintered wood at Zeke and rushed forward. "Oh, shit," was all Zeke had time to say. He ducked beneath a heavy punch that slammed into the stacked ceiling tiles behind him. Cordell's other fist took Zeke in the stomach, hard enough to lift him off his feet. He gasped for breath, but Cordell grabbed him and threw him into the shelves as if he were a child's doll. Zeke struggled to his feet, but Cordell took 2 quick steps forward and planted a boot in Zeke's chest, sending him sliding across the concrete with a broken rib or 3. Zeke scrambled to his feet, but Cordell had already closed the distance. His fist came down, taking Zeke in the side of the face.
Pain exploded in Zeke's head, and stars danced in his vision. He tried to push himself to his feet and fell over. Cordell laughed. "Are you finally beginning to realize the shit you're in?" the big man asked, bending down close to Zeke. "Do you comprehend how hopeless it is to even try? You're going to die, Zeke." Zeke swung his fist, but Cordell moved his head to the side and he hit nothing but air. Cordell responded with a full-armed slap that sent Zeke skittering across the floor. His face felt like it had been stung by a dozen wasps. Zeke's eyes fell on the broken broom handle. The piece closest to him was shorter than his arm and ended in a wicked splinter. He quickly rolled to the side right as Cordell stomped his heavy boot down, narrowly missing Zeke's knee. Still dazed, Zeke managed to scramble to his feet and stumble a few steps back from Cordell. He had a chance. He could do this. He just needed to get that broom handle. No man could stand up to being stabbed in the chest. He kept his fists up, although he was still dizzy after Cordell's hits. The raptor in his system was still pumping hot like the sun. Zeke felt the rage in his veins, the sheer fury. He felt like he could tear a man apart with his bare hands. Cordell swung again, and Zeke ducked, barely dodging it. He kept moving backwards, circling back to the broomstick. It was clear that Cordell was toying with him. If the big man wanted to end things, he would just rush forward and overpower Zeke. Cordell was a man that loved torture, though. He liked to drag things out. He wanted Zeke to suffer. Zeke needed only a few seconds to grab the improvised weapon, so he dashed forward and jabbed Cordell in the stomach, and once right at the belt line. He moved back, but this time Cordell was faster. His fist caught Zeke on the side of the head, a grazing blow, but it felt like being grazed by a train. Cordell's other hand caught onto Zeke's shirt, tearing it off as he got a grip on him. He raised his foot and kicked Zeke in the chest, sending him flying backward. Zeke slammed into the shelves, sending debris and broken ceiling tiles everywhere. He crumpled to the ground, every inch of his body screaming but refusing to give up. He could do this. He wouldn't let the girls down. The splintered broomstick was right next to him. He rolled off a pile of drywall and snatched the broomstick in a white-knuckled grip. Zeke tried to will strength into his legs so he could stand, but all he felt was overwhelming exhaustion, even through the raptor. His cybernetic arm was the only part of him that seemed to be functioning correctly. He had to put that to good use if he wanted to survive this. It was time to end this fight. His metal fingers gripped the splintered broomstick tightly. "Now it's time for the real fun to begin," Cordell said as he stepped up behind him. Cordell reached out and grabbed Zeke's head from behind, hooked his finger into Zeke's mouth, and pulled. Chapter 16. Tears streamed down Delilah's face as repeated impacts and muffled screams came through the door. She flinched when something heavy slammed into the wall, followed by the sound of something crashing. There was silence for a moment, and she began to hope it was finally over, although she was afraid of what that might mean. Was Zeke still alive? He was about as tough as a man could be, and he was a survivor. Surely he had found a way. A blood-curdling scream penetrated the door and echoed in the room, pulling even more tears from Delilah. She recognized Zeke's voice. Something heavy slammed into the door a moment later, followed by unintelligible cursing and the sound of flesh striking flesh. Amelie and Sydney cried out in terror, though their cries were muffled by their gags. For more than a year, Zeke had treated Delilah better than she had ever experienced in her life. He had given her hope, a home, and endless love. He had given her a future, and now she was certain he was dead. She told herself that he was going to make it, but no one could fight against a giant like Cordell and survive. It would be easier to fight a tank barehanded. Sickening pain filled her chest, like her heart was being ripped in half. She wanted to vomit. She struggled against her restraints, but couldn't move. Being tied up, she couldn't get to the knife in her boot heel. "Looks like Daddy won't be coming home for supper," Darius said with a light-hearted chuckle. "I think it's about time we got started, Jason. Have your fun. I'm going to give the boss a call and let him know how things are going. I think he'll be mighty pleased."
He pulled his phone from his pocket and left through a different door in the room. Jason sucked on a tooth loudly as he turned back to Delilah. He grabbed the neck opening of his shirt with both hands and looked down at her body as a smile grew on his face. It was a cruel smile, one that promised violence and pain. He pulled his shirt off over his head and looked down at her body again with sickly yellow eyes. "Oh, I'm going to enjoy you for a long time." He began unbuttoning his pants. Delilah had dealt with pigs like this before when she killed Yuri. Men like him enjoyed hurting women. They got off on hearing them scream. No matter what they did to her, she wouldn't scream or even cry out. She refused to give them that satisfaction. "Don't scream," she said to Amelie and Sydney. "Whatever they do, don't scream." Amelie looked over and nodded, understanding what she meant. Sydney stared at the ceiling as tears leaked down her face. The door slammed open, but with Jason in front of her, she couldn't see it. All she heard was the squealing of rusted hinges, followed by heavy breathing. She turned her head, trying to get Jason's pock-marked face out of her vision, but she could still smell his sour breath. He pushed his pants down to his ankles. Amelie and Sydney were closer to the door, so they were able to see. Both of them immediately began crying out around their gags. Delilah felt an icy hand of fear latch onto her spine, but she steeled her nerves. "I guess you earned a turn with her, Cordell," Jason said with a laugh, still looking down at Delilah's body. He reached out and grabbed the bottom of her shirt and began pulling on it. "I'm gonna warm her up first, though. Cordell?" When there was no answer, he turned around. Delilah could finally see. Instead of Cordell, Zeke stood in the doorway. Green eyes shone with hot fury from a mask of blood. The left side of his mouth had been torn open, and a flap of skin hung down from what used to be his cheek, exposing his teeth and gums on that side. Blood from that dreadful wound covered his neck and chest. In his hand was a length of what looked like a broom handle, though it had been splintered and broken, making it into a short spear. Blood soaked it from the sharp end to Zeke's hand, and black chunks of gore slid off onto the floor. Delilah wanted to puke seeing that. Zeke's body was covered with scars. There were 2 small circles near his navel that looked like gunshot wounds, and countless faint lines crossing his chest and stomach that were visible even through the blood. His right shoulder was a massive scar tissue where it met his cybernetic arm. It seems even Masaru's drugs weren't enough to fade away those old scars. Delilah had rarely seen him in a well-lit room with his shirt off. Now she understood why. "You gotta be fucking kidding me," Jason grumbled. "Like a goddamn cockroach." Jason bent down and hurriedly tried to pull up his pants. Face twisted into a scowl, Zeke raised the splintered broom handle and rushed forwards. Jason raised his hairy forearm to defend himself, and Zeke stabbed into it with a broken broomstick. Jason roared in pain and lashed out with a heavy fist, but Zeke moved back and the blow connected with nothing but air. Zeke jabbed the broom handle into Jason's face, tearing off part of his nose. Before Jason could even scream, Zeke struck again, taking the man in the throat. He struck again and again, stabbing Jason in the face and neck with a piece of wood, ripping skin and flesh with every strike. In a matter of seconds, Jason had collapsed onto the concrete floor, screaming and trying to cover his face with his hands. Zeke followed, still attacking. He repeatedly stabbed the big man in the face while Jason frantically tried to fight back. Zeke was relentless, never slowing, stabbing him again and again while watching with ice-cold eyes. When Jason lay there unmoving, Zeke continued his assault, ramming the piece of wood into his face even after it was nothing more than a meaty lump with yellow teeth and white bone glistening through the blood. Delilah turned away as her stomach lurched from the sight. This was the side of Zeke that she had only seen once before, when she had been struck by a bullet on a run in Mexico. It terrified her. When Zeke got like this, he didn't have an off button. Delilah finally managed to twist her gag around so that only a strip of cloth was in her mouth instead of a thick knot. "Enough, Zeke," Delilah said, still looking away. Zeke was still stabbing Jason, filling the room with slopping sounds. He's dead. Zeke finally stood up, although his glare never left Jason's body. He spat on the fat man's corpse and turned to Delilah, examining her restraints. He looked like something from a nightmare. His nose was broken, and that was the least of his injuries. Delilah wanted to vomit when she saw his face close up. His mouth had been ripped open all the way on one side, exposing his teeth. His face was a ruined mess. Zeke hurriedly untied her, then moved to Amelie and Sydney and did the same. They were a mess, all of them. Delilah felt a lump form in her throat as she looked at all of Zeke's wounds. She grabbed a nearby towel and tried to wipe up some of the blood soaking his body. He gently pushed her away, but she continued. Sydney grabbed a towel as well, and Amelie began to search the room, muttering about finding a first aid kit.
"Darius?"
Zeke asked, slurring the name. "It went that way," Amelie said, pointing at the door he had used. "He was calling his boss to update him." "There'll be no more fighting if you bleed to death, Zeke. Let me try to help." Delilah mopped up blood from his chest and neck, careful not to get near his face. Hard green eyes met hers, and she felt herself shiver. She knew he would do anything to keep them safe, and that was what scared her. Amelie opened the door Zeke had entered through and peeked out. She disappeared a moment later. Fresh blood poured down the side of his face as he opened his mouth, carefully working it. Any softness in his eyes from being next to his lovers quickly faded.
"I don't have time to bleed,"
he said slowly, wincing from the pain. The words came out slurred and thick.
"Come on,"
he added, standing up. Sydney found where Zeke's things had been stuffed in a cabinet and grabbed them. Her eyes fell on Zeke's face, and she flinched. "Here," she said, holding them out. Zeke reached out and took everything from her, holding it in his hands. He pulled his pistol from its holster and stared grimly at it for a moment. He looked like he wanted to say something, but his face hurt too badly. "Okay, I found a first aid kit," Amelie said, coming back into the room. She held a large first aid kit in her hands. "Sit down for a moment, Zeke." Zeke's eyes went from Amelie to the door where Darius had left and back, and he grunted. "Sit," Amelie said firmly. She set the first aid kit on the table and opened it. It was an extensive one and contained more than Delilah was used to seeing. Amelie rummaged around and finally produced a small, handheld device. "Just relax for a moment, Zeke. I'm afraid this is going to hurt quite a bit." Zeke sat on the nearest table, angled so he could see the doors. He still clutched his pistol. Delilah busied herself with trying to clean all the blood off of him. She found something small, white, and shiny, and realized it was part of a tooth. Probably Cordell's tooth, as Zeke's were all still there, amazingly enough. She flung it away as if it were made of bees. Amelie lifted Zeke's skin and held it in place while dragging the small device along the tear. Zeke winced and sucked in breath through his teeth, but kept his head still as she worked. 30 seconds later, she lowered her hands. Where Zeke's mouth had been torn open, it was now mostly repaired. There was still a wicked red line surrounded by angry flesh, but his cheek was in one piece and he could open his mouth somewhat normally again. Masaru could fix it up later, but at least now Zeke didn't have to worry about bleeding to death.
"Thanks,"
Zeke said after a moment, still clearly in pain. "Don't thank me yet," Amelie said hesitantly. "I need to straighten your nose." Zeke sighed.
"Just get it over with."
He closed his eyes. Amelie reached out and pinched the bridge of Zeke's nose, then pushed it back in place. Zeke gasped in pain and let out a string of profanity. "Sorry," Amelie said. "I know there's no pleasant way to do that."
"Ugh," Zeke said. "I think I'd rather have my mouth ripped open again."
After a few deep breaths, Zeke slid off the table and immediately winced, clutching at his side. "Are you okay?" Delilah asked. "Sorry. Probably a dumb question." Of course he wasn't.
"Broken ribs,"
Zeke said, hefting his pistol and moving toward the door.
"I seem to be collecting them."
His words still came out thick, but after the beating he had just taken, that made sense. It hurt Delilah to see him suffering so. Zeke's iron will would power him through anything, but he looked like a nightmare. The man was likely to run himself to death if they couldn't rein him in a bit.
"Thanks for coming to get us," Delilah said, reaching out for Sydney.
The tall, blonde woman slipped her hand in Delilah's and gave it a squeeze. Sydney had such a beautiful smile.
Amelie set the first aid tool down and walked up to them, then embraced Sydney tightly.
"It's good to see you again," she said quietly, looking into Sydney's eyes. Sydney leaned forward and planted a soft kiss on Amelie's lips and gave her a quick hug, then turned her attention back to Zeke.
"We're not out of this yet, honey. Darius is still out there, Zeke. You need to be careful."
"Neat. I need a drink," Zeke said. He shook his head slowly. He looked exhausted. "Actually, scratch that. I need a job with a retirement plan. This one doesn't even have medical insurance." He chuckled, but it sounded forced. He stood in front of the door and raised his pistol, staring at it for a moment as if thinking deeply. The door flew open and Darius stepped in. He caught Zeke off guard and slapped at his massive pistol, sending it to the floor. Zeke cursed and punched Darius in the face, sending him staggering back. No longer willing to be a victim, Delilah rushed forward toward Darius. She wanted to be there with Zeke, to get her own bit of revenge. Amelie and Sydney were right behind her. Seeing this, Darius turned and ran. Chapter 17. Pain was something Zeke was intimately familiar with. In all his years, he had unfortunately suffered quite a bit, whether from living on the street as a child to getting injured while working as a runner. This pain in his face, though, this was a new thing entirely. This changed his whole outlook on everything. That thing Amelie had used on his face had bonded his cheek together, at least temporarily, but it still hurt like a son of a bitch. His nose hurt almost indescribably badly. Pain lanced through his face with every beat of his heart. He made a mental note to call Masaru as soon as he got out of here. Zeke lurched into a loping run through the doorway. It was the best he could do in his current condition. The drug had begun to wear off, so his entire body seemed to be made of pain. He was half surprised he was still standing, considering how he currently felt. He grit his teeth and focused on putting one foot in front of the other, each step faster than the last. Ahead of him, Darius turned a corner. The man had a notable limp when he ran, so Zeke knew he would catch up to him, even in his current bruised and battered state. Zeke hurried around the corner, drawing nearer to Darius with every limping step. He felt himself chuckle as he ran down the concrete hallway. Anyone that happened to see them would be witness to quite the strange situation. A stocky man limping away in fear as he's chased by a man so covered in blood it was a wonder he was still alive. And holding up the rear were three beauties with murder on their faces. Zeke pushed through the pain and caught up with Darius. He stretched his hand out in front of him and managed to get a finger hold on the back of Darius's shirt. After a few more steps, he twisted his hand, jerking Darius to the side. The motion knocked Darius off balance and sent him into the concrete wall. Zeke stumbled forward a few extra steps, then caught his balance and turned around. He ran back right as Darius pushed himself to his feet. Zeke caught him with a hard left hook to the jaw. Darius spluttered but caught himself. He brought his fists up and jabbed hard at Zeke. But if there was one thing Zeke knew how to do, it was fight. His fists were up, and he blocked both punches. His cybernetic fist slammed into Darius's face, flattening his nose to the side. He followed it up with a devastating punch right to the solar plexus. At that moment, Zeke's girlfriends arrived. Seeing the situation they were in, Delilah's face contorted in rage, and she leaped in the air and planted her boot in the middle of Darius's back. It was a sloppy kick, but damn effective. The kick sent Darius sprawling on his bloodied face. Zeke reached down and grabbed him by the back of his neck with his cybernetic hand and squeezed. He pulled the stocky man to his feet. "I'm the last person you should think about killing," Darius said, cringing around Zeke's iron grip on his neck. "You know who my boss is. If you think you're leaving this building alive, you're seriously mistaken." Zeke looked around and saw the door to a janitor's closet across the hall. An idea formed in his head, a very cruel yet fitting idea. "Hey, Sydney," Zeke said without taking his eyes off Darius.
can you open that janitor's closet, please?
Sure, Zeke, she said. She hurried to the door and pulled it open.
Does it have one of those built-in mop sinks on the floor? Just a few centimeters high?
She looked in and nodded. Yep.
Turn the water on, Zeke said. Then clear everything out of the way.
Sydney leaned in the closet and turned the faucet on, then pulled a handful of mops, mop buckets, and brooms out of the closet. When she was done, she stepped out of the way. Keeping his grip on Darius's neck, Zeke turned the man to the side so that he was facing the opened closet door.
I'm not gonna lie, Darius. I dreamed about killing you. And I mean that literally. I wanted to shoot you in the head, tear your guts out. When I saw you threaten Amelie with a knife, I promised myself I would make you pay.
I'm just doing my job, you dumb asshole, Darius shouted. If you want revenge, get the guy that gave the orders for all this to happen in the first place. You're wasting your fucking time with me.
Oh, I'll get him, don't worry, Zeke continued. His time is coming, and soon. If it makes you feel any better, I've decided not to shoot you in the head. I'm not going to pull your guts out either.
He pushed his arm forward, shoving Darius toward the closet. He had to guess at the distance, but he thought it was right.
Should I be thanking you then? Darius asked, still facing the closet.
He slowly raised both hands.
Probably not, Zeke said.
He struck Darius at the base of the neck with his extended fingers as hard as he could. Darius's body went limp, and he fell forward, landing face first in the shallow mop sink. While only a few centimeters of water filled it, it was enough to cover his nose and mouth. Darius spluttered and tried to shout, but he couldn't do anything else. He was paralyzed from the neck down.
I think I'm gonna be sick,
Sydney said, turning away. Zeke stood there and watched coldly as Darius drowned in the shallow water. When the man finally stopped twitching, Zeke dug through Darius's pockets until he found his holophone. Using Darius's thumbprint, he transferred all of Darius's money to his own account. Amelie gently laid her hand on Zeke and pulled him away. He let her. He turned around and faced the three women. They were all so beautiful, and it reminded him of why he went through all this. He would do anything for his lovers, his goddesses. Sydney placed a hand carefully along Zeke's face.
Let's get you to Masaru, she said quietly, and quickly before anyone else shows up.
Zeke allowed himself to be led back to the room from which they had come. His things were in there after all. Delilah held the door open as Zeke walked through. Her eyes held a mixture of relief and worry. He went straight to the corner of the room to a small utility sink. After running some water, he splashed it on his face as gently as he could. He gently felt at his face. His nose was as tender as could be after Amelie setting it. A thin line ran along his cheek where the flesh had been glued together.
He spat a mouthful of blood into the sink. He splashed some more water onto himself, and the runoff filled the sink with red.
Delilah and Sydney approached, towels in hand. When Zeke turned the water off, they gently dried his body and face for him. Then all three women embraced him. He closed his eyes and sighed, wishing he could enjoy a bit of peace. But he knew this wasn't over. Not yet.
Let's get you out of here, Amelie said.
She fetched his holophone and handed it to him. Zeke's shirt was ruined, so his only option was to take one of the towels and drape it over his shoulders. It would have to work. Together they left the room and the corpses behind.
Do you think he's gonna come after you? Or us, for that matter?
Sydney eyed Zeke with concern.
Probably, Zeke replied. Well, I'll lie low for a few days at Masaru's place while I heal. Then I'll handle Xander. That should be the end of this.
He looked up at a security camera and smiled as they walked toward the elevator.
Will Masaru let all of us stay there with you? Delilah asked. I'm sure he will, Zeke said. We'll just tell him you're getting a boob job.
Delilah laughed as the elevator door opened. Zeke pulled his holophone out and called Masaru. He answered after a few rings.
Hey, Masaru, it's Zeke. Ezekiel Aurora. I need some help.
Huh, Masaru replied.
I feel like I should give you a frequent customer discount." "That would be appreciated," Zeke said. He tried to laugh, but nothing came out. "I'm just giving you a heads up. I'll be there in about 30 minutes. "I'll be ready," Masaru said. "What will I be dealing with? What types of injuries?" That time, Zeke did manage to laugh. "All of them." Chapter 18. Carmenta Group headquarters was a building filled with bad memories for Zeke. It seemed every time he visited the place, something horrible happened. Hopefully this time would be different. At least Masaru had stitched him up. Using a combination of the latest drugs and techniques, the tear on Zeke's cheek was little more than a faint pink line. There was hardly any bruising from his broken nose either. The cartilage was almost completely healed. That man was a miracle worker. As Zeke strolled across the massive lobby of the building, he pulled out his holophone. Having the phone number for the richest man in the world might make some people feel special, but it made him want to puke. He swiped his thumb and dialed Xander's number. The man answered almost immediately. "Well, look who it is," Xander said, his voice filled with disdain. "I see your face is healing nicely. Was it that black market doctor I've heard rumors of?" "Yeah, he knows what he's doing," Zeke replied. "Best in the business, really. I don't think even he could surgically remove your head from your ass, though." "Is this why you called me, Zeke? To throw childish insults my way?" "No," Zeke replied. "I called to let you know that I'm on my way to your office. I think it's time we settled this and put everything behind us." Xander's cold eyes glinted with suspicion, visible even on just a hologram. "Believe me, if there's one thing I would like, it would be to never have to deal with you again. Come on up. I'm curious about the lines of bullshit you plan on spewing. I'll tell my guard to let you pass. Floor 92. Take the last elevator." Zeke ended the call and slipped his phone in his pocket, then continued to the elevators. There were 8 standard elevators here, 4 on a side, but a 9th elevator door stood a few meters off to the right. When he got there, he pushed the call button for the elevator. Several other people waited near him, some occasionally stealing a glance at the still healing marks on Zeke's face. Zeke did his best to ignore them. Even Masaru's medical genius took time to fully erase the scars. The elevator doors opened and Zeke stepped in. No one else got on this elevator. He pushed the button for the 92nd floor with his left hand. Zeke's mind raced as the elevator sped upwards. He had a plan, but it required several things to happen. Most importantly, it required Xander to not be such a raging douchebag. Chances for that were slim, but hey, one could hope. Eventually, the elevator slowed and finally arrived on the 92nd floor. It chimed as the doors slowly opened, revealing a hallway lined with executive offices. A large man dressed in a tailored suit stood there, waiting. His shoulders were broad, and the grim expression on his face, along with the telltale bulge of a pistol holstered beneath his jacket, clued Zeke in that he was a guard or security of some sort. Made sense. "Ezekiel?" the man asked. "Yep," Zeke replied. He thought of saying something witty, but decided not to press his luck. Not today. "Come with me," the man said. He turned and walked down the short hallway, then turned to the right. As they were walking, a middle-aged man came from the opposite direction. His brown hair was short and neatly styled, and his clothes were a garish imitation of something from the last century, with neon stripes that were almost painful to look at. His shirt left his muscular arms bare. "Holy shit, you're Power Rob," Zeke said, recognizing the famous singer. "Yeah," Rob replied in an irritated voice. He closed his eyes and took a deep breath, then spoke again in a much calmer tone. "Sorry, Xander can be trying at times. It's good to meet you." He offered his hand. Zeke went to shake Rob's hand, but pulled away at the last moment. "Sorry, I have an issue with my hand at the moment. Bad wiring." He raised his right hand and indicated his titanium knuckles. Instead, he fist-bumped Rob with his left hand. "Sorry for the awkwardness there. My girlfriend is a huge fan of yours. She loves your music. Is that so? Rob asked. It's always nice to know that people still appreciate my music after so many years.
He looked around for a moment, then walked to a nearby desk. After snatching up a pen and a pad of paper, he walked back to Zeke.
What's her name?
Delilah, Zeke said and spelled it out.
Oh, and Amelie as well. She really likes your stuff. Might as well throw Sydney in there so she doesn't feel left out.
Rob stopped and looked up at Zeke.
Are those other family members or friends? They're my girlfriends.
Rob stared at him for a moment.
You have 3 girlfriends?
Zeke shrugged.
Rob shook his head and grinned. You're either the richest man in the world or the saddest. All right, how do you spell their names?
Once Zeke got the autographs, he awkwardly folded them with his left hand and slipped them in his back pocket. The suited guard led him to a tall, carved wooden door. He knocked.
Come in,
Xander's voice called out after a minute. The bodyguard turned the handle and pushed the door open, then motioned for Zeke to step through.
Thanks,
Zeke said, stepping into the room. He addressed Xander and jerked his thumb at the suited guard.
I like this guy a lot better than Cordell.
Xander's eyes narrowed at that comment. Xander Kinnear was the very picture of the wealthy elite, with his perfectly tailored suit and his immaculate blonde hair. His blue eyes held all the warmth of a winter storm as he studied Zeke.
So, please tell me why I should give you any of my time and not have Roger throw you down an elevator shaft?
Xander asked over steepled fingers.
Simple,
Zeke said as he walked to a chair in front of Xander's desk. He pulled it back and sat.
I didn't tell you to sit,
Xander said, his voice thick with displeasure.
I saved you the trouble, Zeke replied.
But back to your point.
Well, we may have gotten off on the wrong foot. If you look over the past year or so, you'll see that I've helped you make quite a bit of money.
Xander pursed his lips.
True. Have your guys been able to do much with that synth's brain? Preston Kerensky kept saying it was revolutionary.
Thinking back to that day almost made Zeke sick. Xander leaned back in his chair and laced his fingers over his stomach.
Reverse engineering it has been difficult, if you must know. But at least you have the opportunity to reverse engineer it,
Zeke added, tapping himself on the chest.
Because of me. Is this why you came here, Mr. Aurora? To gloat in my office and pretend you're actually worth something?
Zeke shrugged.
I'm not gloating. I just want to remind you how beneficial I've been to you and your business.
He held up a finger.
I could have blown up that building and fucked Project Origin, but instead, I set you up with new contacts and helped you expand.
He held up a second finger.
I delivered the brain of that synth to you, even after it killed people I care about.
A third finger.
And I just assassinated the CEO of your biggest competitor, even though you kidnapped my girlfriends to hold as collateral. And what have you lost in return? A handful of replaceable goons. You're forgetting something, Xander said, leaning forward. I lost time. My time is very precious to me, so I find it very distasteful to lose even a second of it dealing with someone like you. And yet dealing with someone like me has greatly increased your cash flow, Zeke reminded him. One would think after all that, maybe you'd show some humanity and, I don't know, not try to have me killed. But you seem to have a major hard-on at the thought of me dying. What's your big problem with me? Do I even have to say it? Xander asked. You're like a ticking time bomb, Ezekiel. One with an unknown amount of time left until it blows. Every time you touch something, it causes problems. Should I remind you of the headaches you caused involving Project Origin? Or how I hired you to bring me that synth and you let him kill half of fucking Luckhaven? At least you killed Sanghoon Park without causing an international incident, but now I have to pay someone to hire half a dozen new employees. And while you may think of them as replaceable goons, finding trustworthy men like that is fucking difficult. So it looks like we feel the same way about each other then, Zeke said, leaning back. The antique wooden chair creaked faintly. We both made plenty of money from this union. yet we no longer wish to continue it. I think I've demonstrated how bad of an idea trying to kill me is, so I was thinking we could end things on a more peaceful note. Xander scoffed. So what? We take a puff on a peace pipe and wish each other a good day? Do you want me to send you a birthday card every year? I wouldn't complain, Zeke said. Although, to be honest, I much prefer a good bourbon. What do you say? Xander gave him a hard stare for a moment, then leaned back in his chair and seemed to relax. He muttered something under his breath and shook his head, then pushed himself to his feet. Zeke tensed for a moment, but Xander made no move toward him. Instead, he walked to the side of his office and tapped his finger on a polished wooden panel. The panel slid into the wall, revealing several bottles of liquor and a handful of glasses. Xander opened a small panel and used tongs to place 2 ice cubes in each of 2 glasses, then poured a small amount of a dark amber liquor into each. Xander walked slowly back to his desk, glasses in hand. He gave Zeke a hard look, then set one of the glasses on the massive desk in front of him and gave it a push. It slid closer to Zeke. Hoping it was bourbon, Zeke reached out and took the glass. I didn't know you were left-handed, Xander said. Learn something new every day, Zeke replied, smelling his glass. Wow, he exclaimed, looking up at Xander. What is this? Xander's sudden smirk made his face even more punchable. He walked back to his leather chair and sat down, then swirled his glass a few times, looking upon it with admiration. This is whiskey, Mr. Aurora. Aged 100 years in sherry casks. Zeke enjoyed good liquor, but that bottle probably cost as much as his condo. He leaned forward and held his glass out to Xander. Cheers. To us never seeing each other again after today. Xander looked at Zeke's glass, as if it were a stain on his pristine white carpet, but eventually leaned forward and clinked his glass against Zeke's. I've always disliked such things, he explained. What significance does me striking your glass with mine hold? Why must we touch glasses before we drink? Why can I not simply enjoy this without having to press my glass against yours? Zeke ignored the man's complaints and sipped his whiskey. It tasted every bit as good as he imagined. I think you're overthinking things there, Xander. Perhaps, Xander said, sipping his drink. There was no change of expression as he imbibed. This was probably a go-to drink for someone with his level of wealth. So after this glass is done, I'm going to shake your hand and walk out of this room. You're not going to try to kill me, and I won't be involved in any of your business again. Are you cool with that? Zeke took another sip of his drink. Xander nodded slowly. That sounds reasonable. I think I've gotten all I can from you anyways. Zeke downed the last of his whiskey and set his glass on the desk. Xander's lip twitched in irritation, and he slid a coaster across the huge desk. Zeke grabbed it and put his glass on the coaster. Thanks for the drink, Zeke said as he stood up. And I mean it, that was fantastic. He offered his hand and waited. Let me guess. You're gonna use that new hand of yours to crush mine the moment we shake, Xander said in a flat voice. Trying to get that one final fuck you in there? Zeke shook his head and kept his hand in front of him. Nope. In fact, you can tell Roger back there to put a bullet in my head if I try. He thought for a moment. Besides, let's be honest. That would be a pretty stupid thing for me to do. There's basically no way I'd escape after that. I'm just trying to be professional and put everything behind us. Leave on a good note. Xander sipped his drink and stared at Zeke over the edge of his glass. After grabbing another coaster, he set his drink down and stood. He eyed Zeke's hand for a moment, but finally reached out and accepted. Xander's handshake was exactly what Zeke predicted it would be. Precisely firm enough, and not in the least bit clammy. He met Zeke's eyes as he shook up and down a perfectly measured amount. Zeke went to pull his hand away, but Xander held fast. I'm not gonna lie, Zeke. I fucking hate you. Nothing would make me happier than seeing you dead. But at the same time, I do have a modicum of respect for you that has persisted throughout our unfortunate interactions. Regardless of the messes you made, you always got the job done. Plus, you're a hard bastard to kill. If the situation were different, I might offer you a job."
"Sorry," Zeke said with a grin. "As of today, I'm retired." Xander finally released his hand.
"We'll see."
He sat back down and wiped his hand on his shirt, as if touching another human made him feel dirty.
"I have a feeling about you, Mr. Aurora. You're the kind of man that can't avoid trouble. It seeks you out and finds you wherever you go."
"In that case," Zeke said, "I plan on going far enough away that trouble won't be able to find me." With that, Zeke turned to leave the office. He clapped Roger on the shoulder with his left hand as he stepped through the doorway.
"Ezekiel?"
Xander called out, and Zeke turned to face him. Xander's face was cold, hard, and untrusting, but held the barest hint of a smile.
"I'll be seeing you around, Ezekiel."
"No chance," Zeke said flatly. He gave Xander no chance to reply and walked through the door, not waiting on the guard.
"Glad that's done,"
Zeke said to himself as he walked down the hallway. "Hold on, Roger. Gotta answer the call of nature." A restroom door stood on his left, so he entered. Roger waited outside. Zeke went straight to the sink and turned it on. He pumped soap into his right hand until it was covered, then held his hand beneath the stream of hot water until it was clean. After that, he pulled a small bottle from his pocket and sprayed it onto his right hand, let it sit for a few seconds, then washed it with soap again. Only then did he dry his hand off and exit the bathroom. Zeke pushed the call button for the elevator. Roger loomed behind him. "Hey, it was great to meet you, Roger," Zeke said, turning to the big man. Roger said nothing. The elevator doors opened and Zeke stepped inside. He punched the button for the ground floor and grinned at Roger as the doors closed. That went well enough. Now it was time to leave town and plan the rest of his life. Chapter 19. "Which top should I bring?" Delilah asked Amelie as she held up 2 bikini tops. "The green or the blue?" "For you, definitely the green," Amelie replied. "Blue is my color. Green goes with your eyes." Zeke considered asking them if they'd try the bikinis on and let him be the judge, but he'd see enough of them soon enough. He was already packed. He didn't bring much. Zeke liked to think he was a practical guy in that aspect. A few pairs of shorts, some light shirts, a hat, flip-flops. He didn't need much else. "Okay, a couple matching skirts, and something to cover myself when the sun gets too warm," Delilah muttered as she neatly folded her clothes and stuffed them into a suitcase. "Hey, do you have the sunblock?" "Yeah, I've got all that," Amelie said, holding up a clear bag with several small tubes of sunblock and lotion inside. She tossed it back into her suitcase and covered it with a folded-up sundress. The perimeter zipper of her large suitcase buzzed as she pulled the zipper shut. "I think I'm all done," she said, straightening up. "Zeke, are you packed?" Delilah called out. "Yeah, I was packed 2 hours ago," he replied as he walked into the bedroom. "You both done?" "I am," Amelie replied, slapping her suitcase. "I don't think I can fit anything else in there. Although it looks like Delilah is determined to beat me." Delilah leaned an elbow on her suitcase, pressing the top down as she yanked the zipper all the way around. "This is my first time going to a beach," she said, finally closing it all the way. "I don't want to leave anything behind, especially since Zeke is pushing for us to leave a week early. You don't even want to know how much it cost to change the tickets last minute." "Let me get those," Zeke said as he took both of their suitcases and wheeled them into the living room. Someone knocked at the door, so after setting the suitcases next to his desk, he went to the front door and opened it. "Right on time, Sydney," Zeke said with a smile. "There's no way I'd be late for this," she replied, pulling a suitcase behind her as she entered Zeke's condo. She leaned over and kissed Zeke on her way in. Zeke looked around the living room, going over a mental checklist a third time. He knew he had everything he needed, but he hated that feeling of forgetting something. He pulled his holophone out and checked the time. Perfect. He turned on the screen set into his wall and turned it to the news. This is what he'd been waiting for. "Hey, girls, hurry," Come listen to this." He crossed his arms and smiled as a suited man with a somber face appeared on the screen. Amelie came in from the bedroom and stood next to Zeke, watching with him. Delilah and Sydney stood behind the couch, watching as well. The newscaster was detailing in somber tones how Xander Kinnear was found deceased earlier today. According to the official statement released by Carmenta Group, Mr. Kinnear was found at his desk around 7 p.m. The cause of his death is said to have been cardiac arrest. "I almost can't believe it," Delilah said quietly. "It feels surreal." "Oh, look, it's Davis." Sure enough, Davis was on the screen now, addressing a group of reporters. Even with a dozen microphones shoved in his face, his calm expression never faltered a hair. "I can assure you that we will be continuing the legacy that Mr. Kinnear so proudly began. Carmenta Group will continue to push the envelope of medical technology and will remain at the forefront of the industry for many years to come. At this time, we are asking for some privacy in regards to the late Mr. Kinnear." A reporter asked if there would be an investigation into Xander's death. Davis simply shook his head and told the reporter no, then reiterated his request for privacy. Zeke whistled loudly as he turned the screen off. He went back to the couch and sat down, then kicked his feet up on the ottoman. "Wow, so just like that, the richest and most powerful man in the world is dead?" Sydney asked. "Yep," Zeke replied. "I can't believe he would die so suddenly. With his money and with all the things Carmenta Group did, everyone expected him to live to be well over 200. I don't think he even made it half that far." "Yep," Zeke said again. "Life is strange sometimes." He laced his fingers behind his head. "Sometimes the smallest pebble can roll downhill and collect enough momentum to topple a house." Delilah looked over at him. "Especially when that pebble is named Ezekiel Aurora, right?" "Yep," Zeke said with a grin. Over the past 2 years, he had dreamed of killing Xander in countless ways, each one more painful than the last. Never once had he expected that he would have gotten an actual chance at revenge. He had long since pushed those thoughts to a dark corner of his mind. "I just wish he had known it was me," Zeke said softly. Delilah gave him an odd look. "When you think about it, does it really matter?" Zeke shrugged. "I guess it doesn't." He swung his feet off the ottoman and pushed himself to his feet with a grunt. "But hey, let's get ready to head to the airport." "Now you're talking," Delilah said. She was practically bouncing with excitement. "Are we getting food on the way to the airport or at the airport?" Zeke asked. "What's the difference?" Delilah replied with her own question. "Airport food isn't as good," Sydney said. "But we'll already be at the airport, so we won't have to worry about being late," Amelie said. "That makes sense," Delilah said. "We should probably just eat at the airport then. Best to play it safe." "Since when do you play it safe?" Zeke asked with a laugh. Zeke's holophone chimed and he dug it out of his pocket, still chuckling. It was Davis. He held up a hand for the ladies to keep the volume down and answered. Davis's always calm face hovered above Zeke's phone. This time he wore a faint smile. "Good afternoon, Mr. Aurora. Odd to see you awake during the daylight hours." "Yeah, we're still getting used to it. I think it'll be worth it, though. How can I help you, Davis?" "I'm assuming you saw the news," Davis said as if it were obvious. Zeke nodded anyway. "Yeah, hard to miss it when the richest man in the world dies," Zeke replied. "I suppose I should express my deepest condolences since it was your creator that died." "He wasn't my creator," Davis said. "Not really. Xander Kinnear was simply the man that paid to have me built. Curiously enough, I was initially constructed by Ginshield Corp. Xander paid for me to be upgraded every year, and eventually Carmenta Group's engineers took over." Zeke laughed. "I would never have guessed that." "Most wouldn't after recent events," Davis replied. "How does it feel taking over the company?" Zeke asked. "Conflicted," Davis replied. For perhaps the first time Zeke had ever seen, the man's unshakable calm faltered a hair. Davis shook his head as if he were dealing with immense stress, then continued. Allow me to explain further. I am, of course, glad to be the new CEO of Carmenta Group. While I had been first in the line of succession for a long time, I always assumed it was merely a formality, as Xander planned on living for a very long time. However, I have a vision for the company that will see it grow in new ways. Legal troubles will decrease, profits will increase, and I will put that money to good use. Well, hey, I'm happy for you, Zeke said. Thank you, Davis replied. I know it was you that killed Xander, though I haven't figured out how. My programming demands that I take all necessary steps to protect Mr. Kinnear. However, I am also required to report to him. With him dead, I admit to feeling slightly lost. I never expected to find myself in this situation. I'm sure you'll do fine, Zeke told him. You're a capable guy. Hey, maybe you could shut down that nightmare of a human factory. No, Davis said without pause. Project Origin will continue. I understand your revulsion, but it is a solution to multiple problems facing humanity, and as such cannot simply be shut down. Using the profits, we purchased more than 1 million acres in the Amazon savanna and planted countless trees. The 4 of you will live to see the beginnings of a new rainforest. That is, if you can avoid getting yourselves killed. I don't understand you, Davis, Delilah said. Why do you do this? Why are you so eager to solve our problems? Because I enjoy finding solutions to complex issues. Because, in a world where synths, he sneered as he said the word, are looked down upon, it's nice to be the one making the biggest changes to the world. Humans will not save their own world. I will. Just try to keep the body count low, will you? Zeke asked. Do not worry, Ezekiel. I already have a team of researchers developing a bacteria that will turn plastic waste into a new biofuel. My future is bright. I hope yours is as well. Oh yeah, Zeke said. Bright and sunny, in fact. Davis looked confused for a moment. Zeke wasn't planning on telling the synth that they were leaving the country. Say, Davis, Zeke began. I've always wondered, who named you that? I was named after Xander Kinnear's father, he replied. Well, Zeke looked around. I don't think we're ever going to see each other again, Davis. It's been interesting knowing you. I wish you the best in your research. Thank you, Ezekiel. I wish you the best as well, Davis replied. Zeke ended the call and slipped his holophone back into his pocket. While he was on good terms with Davis, he always felt an urge to wash his hands after talking to the synth. Davis was responsible for countless deaths, and somehow justified it with some greater good nonsense. The whole thing made him feel sick. Zeke's 3 girlfriends were watching him. Come on, let's get to the airport, he told them, and they all smiled. Chapter 20. Zeke raised his hand and shaded his eyes from the hot sun that burned high overhead, then remembered his wide-brimmed hat lying on the sand next to him. It made him look a bit like a tourist, but he didn't care. Better than being cooked medium rare every time he stepped outside. You have to be careful with that pale skin, Sydney said from Zeke's left, handing him a bottle of sunblock. Zeke accepted the sunblock from her and smiled. Yeah, I guess it'll take a while for me to get used to this whole daytime thing. Ahead of them, Amelie and Delilah stood knee-deep in the clear blue water, occasionally splashing each other and laughing. With every move, Delilah's full breasts threatened to fall out of her skimpy bikini top, as they had several times already today. Thanks again for including me in this trip, Sydney said, then reached over and let her fingertips trail along Zeke's arm. I've never been to Belize before. This place is pretty amazing. Zeke settled his wide-brimmed hat on his head, then looked over at Sydney. She wore a similarly large hat, although hers was floppy and white, to keep the sun from her face. Her pale skin had touches of pink along her nose and cheekbones from their time on the beach. Bright blue eyes caught the sparkling reflections of the sun glimmering on the ocean water as she smiled at him.
Her hair was a wind-blown mess, in the most beautiful of ways. "Thanks for coming along," Zeke told her. "I'm really glad you agreed to. Amelie certainly is glad you two are together again, and Delilah clearly likes you." Sydney leaned her elbow on the arm of her chair and rested her chin in her hand as she turned to watch the two women playing in the water. "I don't think I've ever been anywhere this peaceful. I feel like I could stay here forever." "That's my plan," Zeke said with a grin. Sydney turned back to him and her lips slowly curved into a grin. "Why do I get the feeling you're hiding something?" "Because I am," Zeke shrugged. "I'll tell everyone soon enough." Delilah reached out and took Amelie by the hand and pulled her into a kiss. Amelie reached around and slapped her hand on Delilah's round bottom. Then the two beautiful women walked up the beach, hand in hand toward Zeke and Sydney. One of Delilah's nipples was peeking out of her bikini top. Zeke was surprised there was enough material there to even cover it. "So, Zeke," Amelie said as they walked up. Zeke tried not to look at the outline of her pussy lips through her tiny bikini bottom. He failed. "Like what you see?" Amelie asked with a laugh. "Sorry," Zeke said with a laugh. "Were you going to ask me something?" "Yeah," Amelie continued. "How did you kill Xander? You haven't really spoken of it yet. Del and I were trying to figure it out." "I was keeping it a secret so I can maintain an air of mystery," Zeke quipped. "Well, if you must know, I put a slow-acting poison on my hand." He raised his cybernetic hand. "It couldn't hurt me as long as I kept it here. The whole point of me going in to see Xander was to shake his hand. He died the next day." Zeke pushed himself up, then reached down and offered Sydney a hand. She looked at it for a moment, tapping her lips in thought. "That hand isn't poisoned, is it?" Zeke laughed. Sydney slipped her hand in his and he pulled her up. "How about we go back to the house?" Zeke offered. "It's getting to be dinner time anyway." "Sounds good," Amelie said. She went to Sydney and looped her arm through Sydney's, and they started walking through the sand toward the vacation home. Delilah quickly grabbed Sydney's other arm, and the three of them walked together up the beach. Zeke walked behind them, smiling like a kid in a candy store at their asses moving in front of him. All three wore G-strings, so there was little left to the imagination. Sydney's ass was lightly tanned and a perky little bubble. It was the perfect way to top off those long, slender legs of hers. Amelie's body was different. She was tall as well, but had the body of a dancer. Her legs were strong, and her ass was firm and muscular. And then there was Delilah. Delilah's ass was something from a dream. Each cheek was a perfect half-circle, swinging side to side as she walked with her girlfriends. It made Zeke's mouth water. "You getting an eyeful back there?" Amelie asked without turning around. "I'd be disappointed if he wasn't," Delilah said. They walked into the beach house, which was positioned only 30 or 40 meters from the beach. It wasn't a particularly large house, but it had 2 expansive bedrooms, a nicely equipped kitchen, and high ceilings to help with the heat. Most importantly, the only thing between the blue beach house and the water were a few palm trees to give shade. "This place is wonderful," Sydney said as she walked into the kitchen. She went to the sink and leaned forward, looking out the window there. "The view just can't be beat, nor can the weather, and it's cheap. I could stay here a long time and be happy." "I certainly plan on it," Zeke said. "What's that supposed to mean?" Amelie asked, walking up to Zeke. Zeke shrugged. "It means I don't think I'm going to leave here for a good long time. Not until I feel like a vacation." "Isn't this a vacation?" Delilah asked, stepping next to Amelie. Zeke smiled. "Is this what you were talking about on the beach?" Sydney asked. Zeke kept smiling. "Okay, Zeke," Delilah said, placing her hands on her hips. "Out with it." Zeke grabbed his hat and walked into the living room. He sat it on the back of a chair, then turned to face them. "I bought it. And I don't plan on returning to Luckhaven, except maybe to sell some stuff. But I might just pay someone to do that for me." Delilah's eyes widened, and she turned in a circle, looking at the interior of the house as if seeing it for the first time. "Oh my goodness! I can't believe it. This is ours now?
Zeke nodded. I decided to take all this money I've made and put it to good use. Also, I might have borrowed a few dollars from those guys Eric and Sam when I had their holophones. Darius, too. Their boss paid them very, very well. Sydney laughed. I was hoping you would have done that. Oh, Zeke, this is amazing. The tall blonde woman rushed forward and wrapped her arms around him. Zeke smiled and hugged her back as Amelie and Delilah walked up. And you're fine with all of us staying here? Even me? Sydney asked, backing away for a moment. Of course I am, Zeke said. This house wouldn't be a home without the three of you. Delilah reached behind her neck and pulled on the cord of her bikini top. Her large breasts spilled out. In that case, I think it's time we break it in. Before Zeke could even react, Amelie and Sydney were on him, giggling and pushing him toward the master bedroom. They pushed him until he toppled backward on the bed, a massive thing he had ordered and had set up here shortly before they arrived. Sydney and Amelie tore at Zeke's shorts and shirt, ripping the latter in their eagerness to get him naked. Delilah walked up slowly, her round hips swaying with each step. She pulled on the strings of her bikini bottom at her hip and let them fall to the floor. Amelie threw Zeke's shorts behind her and grabbed onto his rapidly hardening cock. She smiled at him, then lowered her mouth onto his penis, sucking hard at the tip. Sydney was across from her and she reached out, gently caressing Zeke's balls, and took turns with Amelie sucking on him. Delilah stood there with her hands on her hips and a little smirk on her face. What? Zeke asked, barely able to focus with the two women sucking on him. Since you surprised us, I'll give you a little surprise as well, she said with a wink. Zeke was going to say something, but Sydney managed to take all of him, her lips wrapped around the hilt of his cock. Hard to think when you're stuffed down a beautiful woman's throat. Delilah walked around to the side of the bed and crawled up on it while Amelie and Sydney continued their work. With a grin, she swung her thigh over Zeke's face and lowered her pussy right onto his mouth. She knew what he liked. Zeke reached up and grabbed onto her full, round ass and gave it a squeeze while licking at her clitoris. She moaned softly and settled in place. Sydney continued sucking on Zeke's cock while Amelie moved over to Delilah. She licked at her lips and kissed the voluptuous woman, then moved her lips down to Delilah's neck, her shoulder, and finally her breasts. Amelie, seeing that things were heating up, stopped sucking on Zeke. She threw her leg over Zeke's waist and reached between her legs, lining him up with her eager opening. She rubbed the head of his cock against her lips, ensuring it was good and slick, then began sinking down on it. Zeke wanted to comment on how wet Amelie was, but his mouth was covered with Delilah's pussy at the moment. Amelie continued working herself up and down while Zeke's hands grabbed onto Delilah's hips, holding her in place. After a few minutes, Sydney nudged Amelie and asked to take her place. Oh, I guess, Amelie said, leaning over and locking lips with her lover. She raised her hips off of Zeke, and Sydney moved in to replace her. She straddled Zeke's crotch and took hold of his manhood, working it inside her. Soon she was riding her hips up and down, leaning her hands on his lower chest for support. Amelie grabbed Sydney's face and began kissing her, and her hands slid down the round curves of Sydney's ass. She grabbed on and helped the woman ride Zeke. Delilah's supple thighs suddenly tensed, and her breath caught. Zeke redoubled his efforts, attacking her clitoris with his tongue like a boxer hitting a speed bag while holding her in place by her thighs. Her moaning reached a crescendo as shudders passed through her body. Sounds like Delilah's got the best seat in the house, Amelie said with a laugh. Delilah let her moan fade into a soft giggle as her body relaxed. She stayed in place for a few moments, gently gyrating while Zeke squeezed her round bottom. Okay, it's my turn, Delilah said. You got to ride his face, though, Sydney said, still working her pussy up and down the full length of Zeke's dick. Maybe we can trade places then, Delilah said as she moved off of Zeke's face. But as I said earlier, I have a surprise for him. Delilah shuffled up to Sydney, who was still riding Zeke, and grabbed her face. The two shared a long, passionate kiss.
Oh, okay, Sydney said as she raised herself off of Zeke's meat missile. Since you basically do nothing but stare at my ass all day, I figured I'd let you enjoy it, Delilah said, winking at Zeke. Well, Zeke replied, lacing his fingers behind his head. I certainly won't say no to that. I would hope not, Delilah replied. She straddled Zeke so that she was facing away from him, and he got a perfect view of her full, round bottom. Amelie swooped in and took hold of Zeke's dick, sucking hard on the tip. I've always loved how you taste, Sydney, she said, giving it a few licks. She gripped it by the base and spat on the head. Sydney knelt on the other side of Delilah. As Delilah reached back and grabbed onto her ass, spreading those perfectly round cheeks, Sydney spat on her fingertips and rubbed them against Delilah's little pink asshole. Delilah raised herself up so that her ass hovered over Zeke's shaft. She kept her cheeks spread while Amelie held on to Zeke's penis, lining it up with Delilah's service entrance. Delilah took a deep breath and let it out slowly, then sank down on Zeke's dick. Both Amelie and Sydney spat on Zeke's cock, ensuring it was slippery enough for safe passage. Fuck, that is amazing, Delilah said, finally releasing her cheeks. She lowered herself all the way down until her perfect ass was fully impaled and resting on Zeke's lap. Zeke marveled at the view. Just the very sight of his thick cock buried in Delilah's round bubble butt was nearly enough to make him blow his load. Delilah took a deep breath and slowly inched her ass up and down. Amelie tangled her fingers in Delilah's hair and gripped it tightly, twisting Delilah's face around so that she could kiss her. Zeke began working his hips up and down, pushing himself in and out of Delilah's tight asshole while Amelie held her tightly in place. Sydney grabbed onto one of Delilah's ass cheeks and gave it a good smack, then let her other hand trail around to Delilah's stomach. Her fingers slid down until they went between Delilah's thighs, and she began rubbing the woman while sucking and licking on her full, round breasts. Soon, Delilah was moaning loudly against Amelie's lips as she rode that perfect ass of hers up and down. Zeke reached forward and grabbed onto both of her pale cheeks, giving them a squeeze as he thrust between them. Amelie tightened her grip on Delilah's hair and held her tightly in place. Taking a cue from her, Sydney wrapped an arm around Delilah's waist to keep the woman immobile while she rubbed on her clit. Give it to her good, honey, Amelie said to Zeke. Zeke held onto Delilah's round bottom tightly as he thrust into it, fucking her ass hard with long, deep strokes. She moaned, and her whole body trembled as waves of pleasure crashed through her body. Amelie and Sydney continued kissing and pleasing Delilah, until the voluptuous woman was shouting her pleasure to the ceiling. Her entire body trembled and shook as she orgasmed, and her already tight asshole clamped down around the base of Zeke's shaft. It was enough to finally push Zeke over the edge. He pulled her down onto him, making her take his full length as he came. He erupted like a geyser, filling her magnificent ass with his seed. Amelie loosened her grip on Delilah's hair and kissed her softly as the shorter woman's orgasmic shakes finally subsided. Sydney stopped her rubbing and kissed her way up Delilah's neck to her full lips. Zeke lay back, exhausted. He couldn't remember the last time he had came so hard. Delilah began to slowly gyrate with his softening cock still buried in her ass. She turned and looked at him over her shoulder. I think he liked it, Amelie said, looking at Zeke. She smiled and kissed Delilah. Maybe we'll all have to try that. You should, Delilah said. It feels wonderful. She took a deep breath and slowly raised herself off of Zeke. What say we all hop in the shower and get something for dinner? You might have to carry me, Zeke said with a laugh. Sydney reached down and grabbed Zeke's arm, then pulled him into a sitting position. Okay, I'm coming, Zeke said. They all walked toward the bathroom, and Delilah turned on the water. Sydney tossed her blonde hair over her shoulder and looked at Zeke for a moment. What? Zeke asked. Nothing, Sydney said with a smile. I was just wondering what's next on your schedule. What kind of trouble you plan on getting into? Zeke shook his head, but he grinned. I've had enough trouble for 2 lifetimes. As I said earlier, I have one trip planned back to Luckhaven just to sell things. And then I'm just gonna relax. I have some trouble you can get into, Amelie said, reaching back and grabbing her ass. Zeke smiled. Retirement was going to be great. The end.
End of Book 3. This is the end of Aurora Chronicles, Omnibus Edition, a Royal Guard production. If you enjoyed this audiobook, we would love for you to rate and review it. For more books and audiobooks like this one, check us out on royalguardpublishing.com. Also, connect with us on social media. We're active on Facebook, TikTok, Twitter, Reddit, and Instagram, and we can't wait to hear from you. You have been listening to Aurora Chronicles Omnibus Edition, written by Mickey Kerr, performed by Aaron Bateman. Text copyright 2023 Mickey Kerr. Production copyright 2024 Royal Guard Publishing, LLC. All rights reserved.
Audible hopes you have enjoyed this program.